present. If we would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence, I'd appreciate it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. Now we move into the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
I'll move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
If no one has any changes, I would second that motion.
All right, we had a motion by Mr. Whitson, second by Ms. Smith. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. This moves us into the presentation portion. And first is Dr. Grimsley, School Board Superintendent.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hate I have to do that. Greetings from your RCPS family. First and foremost, thank you all so very much for your support of the budget and for your expediency in approving that budget so we can now get to work getting contracts out to teachers and getting ready to hire for next year. As we prepare for the next school year, we are all hoping for a return to full 5-day instruction for all students with very strict parameters for remote learning requests. As of now, our school calendar assumes a return to a more normal school year. However, we have a major challenge next year in addressing learning loss, social emotional needs, and mental behavioral health needs of our students and families. The additional funding from the federal and state government will be primarily earmarked for the charge of providing all the supports necessary to close gaps caused by the pandemic. Speaking of the pandemic, as you are well aware, schools had to close for 2 days, not 2 weeks, good, last week in order to complete a very extensive contact tracing process for a very large family in our community whose children all tested positive for COVID-19. Remember, we did anticipate that more quarantines could occur after transitioning to full 4 days in person for all students, since while the transmission risk in schools remains extremely low, the health department advises quarantine individuals based on proximity, regardless of the masking and barriers and air quality, etc. So therefore, while we continue to keep transmission rates very low in our schools, we cannot prevent quarantining of individuals based on the definition of close proximity to a person testing positive, regardless of our best mitigation efforts. So, families are please urged to continue to be vigilant in keeping distance from one another, especially given the essential final instruction, assessments, and school events happening this spring. Thank you for your assistance in helping keep COVID out of our schools. The plans for our class of 2021 have been finalized, and I listed the events on my attachment here. But basically, we do have quite a few of those events honoring our seniors, including a senior banquet, alt prom event, which is an outdoor movie. All of these are socially distanced and following the guidelines we have to have for social gatherings. Baccalaureate this year will be virtual. There's a senior picnic taking place, and graduation will be outdoors in Panther Stadium on May 28th at 7 p.m. So all the details are being worked out with that, but that was the consensus of the senior class and their parents and families and teachers and all of those who are participating. That gives us the best capacity to make use of the space, gives seniors the opportunity to have a lot more family members come, and also it helps us better keep the event safe and socially distanced. Additionally, this week is Senior Week, as designated by our Profile of a Graduate team at the high school. Throughout the week, seniors will be celebrating through a variety of fun activities, like a senior breakfast, a special outdoor lunch, tie-dyeing, and a final celebration for Decision Day on Friday, where students, regardless of their post-secondary plans, will be honored for their choice of one of the 3 E's: employment, enlistment, or enrollment. Thank you to all who are writing cards and notes to our seniors through our card drive. If anyone wants to drop cards or notes to seniors in general, or to specific students, you may do so at the high school throughout the month leading up to graduation. The elementary school teachers are also planning many events to celebrate the successes of students and their families for achieving success in the face of these challenges this year. Our families and teachers were deprived of this very important closure last year, and that affected everybody. So this year is very special. Under new guidelines amended by the governor, we are now able to hold some in-person ceremonies for our students. So we do plan to have a preschool, kindergarten, and 7th grade graduation this year. Information about those events have been sent to families. Also, other grade levels are holding special celebrations, either virtually or in person, depending on the guidelines that they're able to maintain. There's also going to be a spring band concert planned for Wednesday, May 26th at 6 p.m. at Panther Stadium. We look forward to hearing from our band. There hasn't been too much that they've been able to do this year based on the previous guidance, but now with the new guidelines, we're able to do that too. I will end today with some accolades. Our Rappahannock chapter of the FFA placed in the top 10 at the Virginia State 4-H and FFA Poultry Evaluation Contest event. Not bad for our inaugural group. After heading to states on April 23rd, our girls cross-country team and individual male runner, Luke Ellis, performed wonderfully well. Rachel Weghorst finished 2nd overall. Jordan Welch and Luke Ellis were honored as top 20 finishers, and our girls cross-country team placed 6th overall. Finally, this week is Teacher Appreciation Week, so if you know a teacher, send them a huge air hug. This year has been extraordinarily challenging for those who have had to manage a completely new landscape in education very quickly. Your approval of the budget was certainly a huge thank you to the staff, and I know any words of encouragement that you could offer to teachers on this home stretch would go such a long way. As always, we appreciate your continued service to our students, families, and this community. And I hope you might want to join us for the school board meeting on May 11th, where we will be honoring our retirees and making some exciting announcements regarding personnel. Okay. Do you have any questions for me?
I heard graduation May 28th, 7 p.m. at the stadium.
Yes.
Is that open to non-family members?
It's going to be invitation at first, but each of our graduates get certain pods with a number of tickets they're able to do first, and then once we see how many we have from that, then we can open it up. But board members, of course, welcome. You'll get an invitation and have a special seating assignment.
And you may have said it. When is the prom?
The alternate prom, which is the movie bonfire, is on May 22nd. And then we are planning sort of a formal prom event on May 15th, which is more so kids can get dressed up and get their pictures taken. It's going to be very different from a traditional prom. There'll be food, and they have to stay with their area, not dancing and things like that. So, but they can dress up and get their pictures. Our senior girls are telling us is like the most important thing. So, okay.
Thanks for making all that effort to bring some sense of normalcy back. I mean, I know last year everyone was trying to make decisions on the fly, and I know there's still controversy this year. So thanks for your leadership and leadership of the principal and kind of working out something that hopefully will make our graduates feel like they're getting a taste of what they've expected for so many years. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you, Dr. Grimsley.
Thank you.
Next, we have the Health Department update with Dr. Green. Welcome.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
All right. You can move that microphone.
There we go. I got it. Okay, that's easier. So my name's Colin Green. I'm a family doctor, and I did my residency training in Lynchburg back in the 1980s. I spent 30 years on active duty in the Army and then retired in 2017 and took the job of the health director over in the Lord Fairfax Health District over in the Valley. Earlier this year, beginning of March, Dr. Karshner, the director you're accustomed to, retired, and I told him I'd watch his district until a replacement could be found, and that hadn't happened yet. So here I am. And if you're asking how long, the answer is I don't know. I tell people it could be a month or a year or anything in between. So I prepared a relatively short presentation, I hope, for you, just to give you a background of what's going on. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So there's an agenda, talk about some statistics, a little bit about the Johnson & Johnson issue that came up, and then talk about vaccinations. And school superintendent actually described my last point pretty well about partying healthy rather than hardy, but I'll mention that too. Next, please. So this is for the Rappahannock Health District, and for anyone not familiar, that also includes Fauquier, Culpeper, Madison, and Orange, in addition to Rappahannock County. And this is the number of new cases per day since the pandemic began back in March of last year. And you can see we had our peak in the spring of last year, and then not too much in the summer. Then we had the big peak over the winter time. And while we've had the numbers recede, they have not gone quite back to where they were last summer. And they certainly haven't gone down to zero, which is where we'd like them to be. The significance right now is we have quite a few fewer susceptible people than we had last summer, since you'll see shortly close to half of the population in this county has been vaccinated. So we've still got some disease running around amongst the susceptible people. Next, please. And this is the death rate. And again, this is the county. This is the number of cases in the county. And you can see toward the end of the summer, beginning of the fall last year, the cases almost disappeared in Rappahannock County. And then they came back with a vengeance in the wintertime, just like they did everywhere else. And again, now down to relatively few, but not down to the near nothing of last summer. So again, we've still got some disease spread that's happening even in Rappahannock County. Next, please. So this is back to the whole district again. Rappahannock County has had a total of 2 deaths in the county, so I'm not going to show a graph of that, and 2, of course, is too many, but there's no point in showing a graph with only 2 marks on it. This shows the number of new cases in the county, again, by date of report. Forgive me, the number of deaths in the whole district by date of report. And you can see that the number of deaths spiked at the beginning of March, which is later than you'd expect. You'd expect it to happen December, January, February. The reason that happened is an accounting error. The state office got behind on death counting. They were so overwhelmed by all the number of cases, and they ended up counting them later, which is why they all showed up at the beginning of March. Those people actually passed away earlier in December, January, and February. But again, in the district, we're down to 0 to 1 per day. Obviously, we'd like it to be 0. We're not quite there yet. But the fact that it stayed low is a compliment to the success of the vaccine campaign, particularly amongst the elderly. Next, please. This is a measure of the number of outbreaks in the district. An outbreak is a measure of spread within an organization. So in the case of a school, there would need to be evidence of spread within the school itself. And while we have seen a lot of situations of cases that have come into the school from the outside, and sometimes exposing people and causing a school to shut down for a little while just because of the need to quarantine, we've seen very, very few actual outbreaks that spread through the schools. So schools have been a very safe place through this pandemic. And I would compliment the school districts in this district, as well as the ones back in Lord Fairfax, for having the courage to be open, at least partially, during this past year, when there was certainly a lot of pressure to shut down entirely. Schools have been one of the safest places to not catch COVID anywhere. Next, please. So here's our vaccine stats, again, for the whole district. About 42%, a little bit more, have had at least 1 shot. And if you take out the children who haven't been vaccinated at all, it's more like 52% now. The 2 middle lines of numbers are a bit old. And if you look at the people over 65, it's between 79 and 80% now that have had at least 1 shot, which is, for the elderly anyway, is getting to the point where we want to be. Obviously, we'd like to be at 100, but we certainly want to be as high as we can so that we get close to that kind of herd immunity state. And herd immunity, the simple definition of that is just there aren't enough susceptible people left to spread the disease anymore. Most of the people you'll meet are immune. You can't give it to them. They can't give it to you. The virus doesn't spread anymore. And once that person gets over it, it's done. So in the elderly population, we're actually close to that. In the general population, we're only about halfway there. And then if you look at the fully vaccinated, those are just all the folks that have gotten their second shot. And since there's usually a 4-week gap, that number lags behind. Next, please. I don't have the precise data for just Rappahannock County that I do for the whole district, but I can say that of all 10 counties in one city that I oversee in my 2 health districts, Rappahannock County has the highest number that have had at least 1 shot, which is almost half. And it also has, I believe, the largest number of fully vaccinated as well. So this county is actually leading Northwestern Virginia on those statistics. Next, please. This is a map of, again, Rappahannock Health District, and Rappahannock County's on the northwest border there. It subdivides the counties by census tract, so it's just kind of a smaller division. And what this map shows is the area by area, how much vaccination has taken place. So, for example, the northern part of Fauquier County at the top, they're over 60% vaccinated, so they have the darker color. And darker is better on this map. The lowest areas you can see down southeastern Orange County, extreme southern Fauquier County, there's some areas where there's not been nearly as much vaccination taking place. If you look at Rappahannock County, there's only 2 census tracts in the county. One is roughly 45% vaccinated, the other is about 55%. So again, as a county, doing better than anybody else overall. What this map does show is where the location of areas that have had less vaccination, though. So you can see the part of the boundary that runs along Warren and Page County has a lower rate of vaccination than the boundary that touches Culpeper and Fauquier. Next, please. So I'm going to stop just for a second. We're pretty much through the population of people that are enthusiastic about getting a vaccine. The ones that are left are either having trouble getting to a place or having trouble getting a shot, or they couldn't make the internet work. You know, some impediments taking place. That's one group. And then the other group are the folks that are just plain less enthusiastic. Some of them are uneasy, maybe a little scared, which is a perfectly natural reaction to something new, something unknown. And then there are folks that are more adamant against it, and I think they're a relatively small number. What the health department would like to do is enable the people that do want to get the vaccine to be able to get it, and to answer any questions people have, whether they be individuals that really don't think they want the vaccine, or whether they're not sure. So that's the role we're looking at. I think our days of high volume vaccination centers are going to be done by, if not the end of May, certainly the end of June. You'll see the big place in Germanna shut down. The big place in Shenandoah University in Winchester is going to shut down here in another week. So we'll be doing a lot of outreach to communities, and in particular, that map I just showed you with the less served areas are the ones we'd like to pay attention to in collaboration with the county leaders. So the people in this room, business leaders, church leaders, and so on. Johnson & Johnson vaccine came out with much fanfare because it was a single shot. One shot and you're done. You no doubt heard there were some situations where some young women had a problem with a rare clotting disorder, and that did happen. When everything was added up, we found 15 of them, with one possible case in a man. And what tipped us off is that all of these cases happened within 2 weeks of the Johnson & Johnson shot. This disease does happen occasionally on its own, but the fact that this many happened that close to the shot was a tip-off. So is it a risk? It is a risk. How big a risk? It's extraordinarily small. just for men, the risk is almost nothing. We only have one possible male case, so it's less than 1 in a million for men. For women, the risk is more like 1 in 250,000. And to put that in perspective, your lifetime risk of being killed by lightning is about 150,000. So it's actually less than that risk. And then the risk of even a young person dying from COVID in the last year was only about 1 in 40,000. So the risk from the vaccine is much less than the risk of dying from COVID. But that said, there are 2 other vaccines out there that don't have this risk at all. So you'll see Johnson & Johnson come back. It's a good vaccine for people where you're going to have trouble finding them the second time around. It's better for the elderly. Ironically, all of these people with the clotting disorder were under age 60. So perhaps in new admits to nursing homes it might be useful, we'll see. But any time it's used, it'll be used with informed consent, so anybody getting it knows about this risk, even though it's small. So with that, the FDA has reauthorized the use, and you may see it again. Again, the Pfizer vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, do not carry this risk at all. There have been 0 cases that have turned up in Pfizer and Moderna vaccination, and we've given, I think, close to 200 million shots of those by now. Next, please. So I'll leave you copies of these slides. I'm not going to read it to you, but vaccinefinder.org is a good place to start. Well, probably a lot of the vaccines, maybe most of them, are being given by pharmacies now, not by the health department or hospitals. And then if you're interested in a health department specific clinic, you can find that in Vaccine Finder, but it's quicker to use the second bullet, the vaccineappointments.virginia.gov. We do still have clinics at the large location at Germanna Community College. There is also, for this region, there is one on Wednesday at the health department gym in Front Royal, in my other district, which may be easier to get to for some folks in this county. And we're planning one this Wednesday and also next Wednesday. You can find that on the same site. And the ones that don't fill, which is most of them, we'll take walk-ins too. Look out for look at your local health, your local news. Listen to the radio. There will be other news about clinics. And again, there will be a lot of outreach activity that goes on, again, to churches, to local officials who may know where there's a neighborhood where there's 30 or 40 or 50 people that just haven't been able to get out. Somewhere we might put up a tent and bring a couple of public health nurses in and actually vaccinate some people that might not otherwise be able to get it. Next, please. We talked about vaccine hesitancy. I talked about that a little bit already. It's not a monolithic thing. There are many, many different reasons why people either don't want the vaccine or are a little uneasy about it. Again, some of them are just, hey, this is new. I'm a concerned person. I want to be informed. And we're happy to discuss and answer questions. And also happy to meet with groups that have questions too about the vaccine on any topic. Next, please. This would just be a reiteration of what our school board chair just discussed. The main thing is we're still wearing masks. If you are outdoors, unless you're in a crowd, you don't need to wear a mask again. If you are in a room where everybody in the room is fully vaccinated, you don't have to wear masks. You can take them off. But if you're in a room with mixed people, or if you're going to be in a crowd, it's still wise to wear them. The 6-foot distancing hasn't changed to decrease the risk of spread. And I hope the hand washing thing never goes away, because that'll stop the next flu season too. Obviously, hanging around with fully vaccinated people is great. I last weekend got to hug my oldest daughter for the first time in a very long time. She'd had her vaccine, her boyfriend had had her vaccine, my wife and I both had it. That was a great day. We held hands and said grace, and that hadn't happened in a long time. Alternate proms run by the school are fine. Please don't run your own. That's a way to spread disease. Most young people are not vaccinated, and they can spread it to other susceptible folks. And then the last one, obviously, is do get the vaccine, please. And if you are at your wit's end and you can't find a clinic, call up the health department. We'll help you. Next, please. This is what we don't want to have happen. We don't want that case curve to go shooting back up again. Let's not be the cause of that. Next. Party healthy. Okay, next, please. And this, you may not have seen, I stole this from a gentleman that lived a century and a half before Christ in Rome. They were in the midst of a mortal combat against the Carthaginian Empire, and a fellow named Cato the Elder announced, "Carthago delenda est." It means Carthage must be destroyed. I have no desire to destroy Carthage. The Romans did a fine job of that, but I do want to destroy this virus. Thank you. And I'll answer any questions.
Dr. Green, thanks very much, and thanks for stepping in and serving at a really critical time. We were all surprised to see Dr. Karchner go in March, but it seems like you've moved in and have taken on a lot of responsibility quickly, and we appreciate it. I'm just looking at the numbers for Rappahannock County. No doubt we're doing well, but as I'm sure you're aware, it's a very unique county. So right now we're approaching 3,500 people who've received at least one vaccination. And my question to you is, if you take our population, about 7,300, back out the 34 vaccinated, and then back out people under 16, plus those who aren't interested in the vaccine, it seems like we still have 3,000 people who might want to get vaccinated and perhaps can't make the 30-minute drive in one of the directions they would need to go. And you mentioned Front Royal, that's getting closer, but bottom line question is, without getting in your way and causing logistical difficulty, would it be possible to put in Rappahannock County in the coming weeks some kind of local vaccination site to see how we could do in chipping away at the remaining 3,000? Because I can tell you I know plenty of people who just aren't going to make the drive, and that concerns me because of our geographic isolation.
So the answer is yes. And our initial intent was to hold a session with the school, since we can lay our hands on some Pfizer and vaccinate down to age 16. But Fauquier Health actually has already done that. So we're not going to go try to do that again. But what we will do is arrange some outreach clinics, and it doesn't have to be just one. It can be, I'm thinking of what they call pop-up clinics. Just drop it in a parking lot or a churchyard or something like that. But what we need is for you all to tell us where we need to put these. So if you probably all know April Actor, you can contact her, you can contact me. Let us know where you think would be a good place, and we can talk about a time and what kind of resources we need to provide.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Sure. And actually, I've left a stack of my cards here, and I think I have one more. This actually has my cell in my direct office. Thank you.
Mr. Parrish, do you have anything?
Well, I'm just curious if these vaccines are 99.5% effective, and you got people that are they're vaccinated, and then somebody who's maybe not vaccinated, and you were asking for them to wear a mask. I mean, if these vaccines are that effective, why would it make any difference if they wore a mask or not?
If who wore the mask?
Well, let's just say somebody that's hadn't been vaccinated.
Yeah.
And is there apparently there wouldn't be, according to the statistics, there wouldn't be any risk.
Well, there's always a risk if you haven't been vaccinated. You can meet someone else who hadn't been vaccinated who's sick. The other thing, the initial reason that they had us continue to wear masks is there was some uncertainty as to whether a person who's vaccinated can still spread the virus without having any symptoms.
Okay.
So the vaccine at the time of the test, and I'm talking about the Pfizer and Moderna now, was about 95% effective. So 1 person out of 20 potentially could still get sick, which is pretty darn good for a vaccine. It's a lot better than the flu shot. Mm-hmm. But what's really impressive is it is 99.3 or 4 nines effective against dying from COVID. So even if you get sick with it, you're much less to have a bad time with it.
Right.
we've had, I think, out of maybe 200 million vaccines, they've counted 77 people who were vaccinated and then died from COVID. And at the same time, there were about 200,000 unvaccinated people who died from COVID. So it's very good at keeping you from dying. It's not 100% at stopping it from spreading.
Right. The only other brief question I had is that, are you seeing any movement toward like a vaccine passport where people gonna, I mean, and one thing is these vaccine cards,
Yeah.
they're a little big, they're a little too big to go in your wallet.
Yeah, you need a bifold. Here we are right here. They are a little bit too big because they
Yeah,
get
I mean, it would
tattered
have
and
been so
mangled.
simple to make them
Yeah.
just a little bit smaller
Yeah.
and you could tuck
That
them
would be
away.
nice. I can pass that on. The CDC, I guess, made this thing. But I haven't heard anything about a passport.
Right,
I mean, this ought to be good enough in my
right,
mind.
right. I'm just wondering.
I don't think there's, passport kind of implies there's some official federal government blessing on it, and that's gonna make a lot of folks nervous. I don't know that there's any point in it. If this is a shot record, I think that's the main thing you need.
Right. Great, thank you.
I do have one question. You don't hear anything about the flu this past year.
Yeah.
Currently.
So the precautions that kept COVID from not spreading worse than it did completely wiped out the flu season, which leads me to believe that the flu is not as contagious as COVID. So, but yeah, we had no flu season this year. And the reason was people stayed home when they were sick, something we'd like you to do during flu season every year. People kept their distance because of COVID. People wore masks because of COVID. And flu is spread the same way that COVID is. It's through droplets that you expel or that you cough. So this mask will stop flu droplets too, just as well as it will stop COVID. COVID must be a little more contagious though, because it obviously still did have a spike in the wintertime.
And then I just heard today that on the news that they don't expect the United States to actually make it to herd immunity because of the numbers of people that aren't being vaccinated.
Yeah, a lot of that is,
News.
well, it's
Fake
news and it's speculation.
Yeah.
Again, we're almost 80% in this district. So across the mountains in my other district, we're more like 74% in the elderly. If the younger folks will come up to that level, we'll probably get there. Herd immunity depends, the point of herd immunity depends a lot on how contagious the virus is too. Like, plenty of, the older folks here will remember measles. Measles is incredibly contagious. One person with measles would probably infect a dozen other people, whereas one person with COVID might infect one or two others during the course of their disease. So measles, you need to have practically everybody immunized before you're going to get herd immunity. For COVID, it's a little bit less. For flu, it's probably even less than that. But yeah, it's kind of speculation as to when or if. I think eventually we will, because one or two things will happen. Either people will get vaccinated or they'll get sick with COVID and develop immunity the natural way, and eventually we'll have enough people that are immune so that the pandemic will pass. And the only real sticker in that could be if the vaccine mutates and comes up with a different spike protein that isn't affected by the vaccine. We have not seen that yet. We hope we never do. So, the flu virus changes its surface proteins every year, which is why we have to have a new flu shot every year. But that's the only virus that generally does that, and this is not a flu virus.
Thank you.
So to your knowledge, how long if somebody gets both the vaccines, how long is that supposed to last?
Well, again, the honest answer is we don't absolutely know because we haven't had enough time. So the first clinical trial, the phase 3 clinical trial began last summer. So we're coming up on probably 10 months and it's still effective at that point. So we'll tell with time. And the question is whether you're going to need a booster someday. Again, we don't know.
So is it a given that it's not indefinite? I mean, is that a given? That
No, it's not a given at all.
So it's possible that it would be indefinite?
Sir?
It's like the polio shot, wasn't that like an indefinite period of time?
Yeah.
So it's possible that this shot would be
It's possible.
indefinite? Yeah. Just-
It's probably not as much as like, chicken pox, for example. If you got chicken pox, you almost almost never got it again. It was very rare to get it twice. I don't think the immunity after COVID is quite that strong, but it's not like common colds that you can get every year.
Appreciate you answering those questions,
Sure.
even though we don't know everything. I appreciate your insight, or foresight, I should say.
Every month that goes by, we know a little bit more. It's a lot easier to answer those questions now than it was a year ago. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Green.
Okay, my pleasure.
I think it falls under what Yogi Berra said, it's very hard to predict the future. No, it's not exactly the way he said it. It's very hard to make predictions, especially about the future.
He also said it ain't over till it's over, and it ain't over.
Yeah. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
All right, next one, under presentations, we have Gail Crooks with the Department of Social Services, and this is her debut at our meeting.
Gail. So
Thank you,
I just wanted to give Gail an opportunity to put a face with a name. Most of you probably read about her in the half of a face, read about it in the paper. We're very grateful to have her here. I know Ms. Lang from the Social Services Board has joined us as well. I'm not an expert on Gail Crooks, but she is. So she can tell you a little bit about her background and how wonderful she is for us and how she's going to help us in the future.
Wow. Well, I have been directly connected to the social services system in Virginia for approximately 11 years. Before that, I have spent my public service career in local government. I was part of the finance office in 2 localities and then part of the county administrator's office in another locality before moving over to the DSS director position in Spotsylvania County. So I was there for 10 years, learned a lot, experienced a lot. And from there, I was in Westmoreland for a brief time, and I am so happy to be here with Rappahannock. It has been said that when you go in one local agency, you've been in one local agency within the system, because every locality has different needs, and there's the way to meet those needs is then different for each locality. So what I hope to do is just learn as much as I can about Rappahannock, about what its needs are, what our resources are, and partner with those already doing an exemplary job. I've just been so impressed by the connections I've made so far and how people are already really are just the network of support that is present in the community. And I'm looking to see how DSS can become even a stronger player in that. I have said in the article that when Ms. Needham put that out, that I am very open to hearing from the community, hearing from the board members, hearing from our partners about what they can identify as needs within the county, big or small, and then working together to find out how we can work together to resolve them. So, and I'm happy to answer any questions about me at this point. I have 2 dogs, a husband, 9 grandchildren, 6 kids. So.
Hi. Thanks a lot for introducing yourself. Just coming into the job, obviously it's going to take you a little while to really get the lay of the land, so to speak. But just off the top of your head, what's your sense right now? What are your top 1 or 2 areas of focus or priorities in the county, and given our community and its challenges from a
Well, a couple
social
things
services standpoint?
Sure, a couple things have caught my attention, and one of the things is that, you know, our demographics of where our population of those who are 65 and older is twice the state average, you know, at 30%. So I want to make sure there's no either unidentified or unmet needs going on there. We do have the experience that we are a bit of a food desert, and that access to grocery stores and food supplies may be a bit limited. Again, trying to sort of learn that because it just may be, it's accessed a little differently here in Rappahannock. But if that's one of the issues that we have, you know, there are ways that we can work together with other partners and providers to address those. And I also want to make sure that people can access our services. You know, the internet is a challenging part of here, so I want to, and people can apply to us online or in person, but I want to make sure they're aware of all the ways that they can apply, and that those areas, those avenues are then responsive to them. So those are kind of some of the things that, we're working on. And then learning more about the mental health network. Everyone, I think, is in one voice that this has been a very challenging year. And we're still learning about some of the long-term effects it may have on our children and our families and on our elderly. So just staying aware of that is an ongoing area that we need to pay close attention to and be ready to respond to as those needs and the ability to meet those and a way to meet those needs is identified.
Great, thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. If we can help you in any way be successful, please let us know.
Thank you. I'm sure I'll be counting on, the partnership that we're all going to have working together.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, we're into the People Inc. annual report with Mr. Goldsmith.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
So I'm Rob Goldsmith with People Incorporated. I appreciate time on your agenda today. We're your community action agency, a private nonprofit organization that has a mission of providing opportunities for economically disadvantaged people to reach their goals to enhance their lives, their families, and their communities. Like all of you and everybody who's spoken before me this afternoon, this has been a strange, difficult, challenging year. We just reopened our offices today after 13 and a half months of doing business remotely, virtually, teleworking. We're really excited about that. While teleworking and remote services work better than I had maybe feared, it still wasn't the same quality as sitting in a room with someone, having a face-to-face conversation with them. So we're really excited about reopening our offices. We spent a lot of this past year responding to the economic fallout from the pandemic. We provided rent assistance here in Rappahannock County. We provided rental assistance. We did that before the state's rent and mortgage relief program got started. And then we did that. We administered the rent and mortgage relief program until the state centralized the administration of that in Richmond. We also provided some loans to small businesses to help them weather the economic downturn, and those were loans where the Small Business Administration made part of the repayments, most of the repayments, and we're actually still doing that. The SBA stopped that for a while, then they restarted it, and today we're making loans where the SBA will make up to 40% of the payments for the borrowers. So that's a help to small businesses. These are small loans up to $50,000 for mom and pop type businesses. Currently, we are providing internet assistance. That's how people have been functioning the past year to a large extent, and so we've been helping people to get connected to the internet if they weren't already. We've been paying past due bills, we've been paying connection fees, and we've been paying up to 6 months of monthly bills going forward. I think that'll probably end sometime in the foreseeable future. The Federal Communications Commission has just rolled out an internet assistance program, and once that is out on the streets, then probably there won't be much need for what we're doing. We are serving a slightly higher income group than the federal program is helping, but once that's rolled out, I think we'll probably stop doing that. we're using money that we had originally budgeted for rent relief and stopped doing that with our own money once the state program got started. And so I think we'll probably do this same kind of thing for the internet assistance. I hate to come sharing bad news, but we applied to become an early Head Start program for Rappahannock County this past year, and unfortunately, we weren't successful. That was our second time applying. We'll keep working at it. This past round, the federal government funded 15% of the groups that applied to them, and so we were in the unfortunate 85% that did not get funding for that. But we're committed to continuing that. The public schools were and have been a great partner in helping us to do that. Child Care Learning Center has also been a good partner in working toward that. So we'll continue that. This has been a busy year for us. Our total funding hit, I think it's the second highest level ever for us, a little over $25 million. We had total economic impact of $108 million, served a little over 11,000 people throughout our service area. I would like to get some guidance from you. You've got my business cards that have my cell phone and my email on it. So if you have ideas of things that you would like to see People Incorporated do here in Rappahannock County, please get in touch with me. A couple of suggestions. If you were interested in development of affordable housing here in the county, and I know that that's waxed and waned in terms of public interest in that. Coming here today, I stopped by a site in Luray where we're just starting to move ground on the construction of a new 52-unit apartment complex there. This past year, we finished rehabilitating 2 older apartment complexes that we purchased and then dramatically improved. There's a picture actually on page 9 of this report of the property in Culpeper that we did. We took what I would characterize as this sow's ear, and I'm not sure it's a silk purse at this point, but it's a lot better than it was inside and out. And we are restricting the rent levels for all of those properties for a 30-year period of time. It'll probably end up being longer than that, but that's how long we're contractually required to do it. So it's been a busy year for us, a challenging year, and in many ways a good year. We feel good about the difference that we've helped in making in the lives of people who were, through no fault of their own, suffering because of the pandemic. So at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions or receive any guidance that any of you all might have for us.
Thanks very much for your presentation. I just had a couple of questions. Just looking at your board of directors and the location of your offices, I'm pretty certain that we don't have a Rappahannock County resident on your board, and if I'm wrong about that, please correct me.
You have had, I'm not sure.
Jennifer Parker was on there, but she's since left.
Right. And that's your appointment. So currently our seat that's designated for the Board of Supervisors is vacant, and we would love to have someone appointed to fill that seat. You've traditionally had your social services director in that position, but we would welcome whomever you chose. We have some counties appoint a member of the Board of Supervisors, some do county staff.
Okay.
Some do a citizen at large. But we'd love to have someone, actually, sir, it's a compliance requirement for us that we have all those board seats filled, and we've got one that we've been holding empty,
Okay.
hoping to get one from you all.
That's great, because I think we would, if possible, like to have a voice there so that you all understand very clearly where we're coming from a land use and zoning perspective, especially when people start talking about affordable housing, because I can tell you a 53 unit apartment building is not in our active vocabulary here. So I'd like to just make sure that we have a voice at the table.
I understand that, and no, we would not move forward with something like that unless it was something that you all supported. Now, what we did in Culpeper and in Remington is something that might go over better here in Rappahannock County, which is in each of those places, we bought a 24-unit apartment complex, and we put about $4 million into improving those properties so that they're much nicer than they had been before. And we weren't creating more housing, but we were restricting it to make it affordable to lower income people.
Great, thank you. And then you are a corporation.
Yes, sir.
I wonder if you just talk briefly about your setting aside the grant and other minor revenue streams, just the top line, $11 million annually. What's the source of that income?
The grant funding, our largest grant.
No, the top line, the non-grant
Oh, I'm
funding.
sorry.
The 11 million. I'm just curious about your revenue streams.
It's a lot of that has to do with the development work that we do. Last year was a huge year for us in affordable housing. The Culpeper and Remington apartments we bought year before last, so the purchase didn't show up, but the rehabilitation work was part of that $11 million. Most of that money was either came from people who purchased the tax credits that we were allocated, or money that we borrowed. There's a lot of bank money involved in that. The other big chunk of that money is we receive allocations when we're fortunate of federal new markets tax credits. They're used for economic development and community development projects. We take those tax credits, sell them, and then use the proceeds to invest in business development or community development projects. One of those last year was a factory that created 60-some jobs in Russell County. One of those was for a small college that was expanding a school of health sciences to create more physical therapists and create a BSN nursing program, and in the process also created a free clinic to provide free medical services to residents. So those are the kinds of projects that we use for that. The balance of that, there's a little bit of private donations, but we don't really do much in terms of soliciting individual donations. And then rents. We own and manage now over 1,000 apartments, and so rents paid by the residents makes a part of that also.
Great. Thank you very much, and we appreciate all the good work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you coming here every year and giving us this update.
Thank you, ma'am. And this will probably be my last chance to do this. After 43 years of People Incorporated, I'm stepping down at the end of the year, so you'll have a much better looking face a year from now. So
Well,
thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, next on the agenda is the public comment period. If anyone in the courtroom would like to speak, please raise your hand when you come up. Let us know your name and the district that you're in, and we're ready. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Matthew Black.
If you could go to the mic, please.
Just want to say briefly, Matthew Black here from the Piedmont District. I'm also joined by Sally Morgan from Hampton District. We're both members of the RAC board, and we're just here to be available to answer any questions you might have while you're discussing the letter that we sent you about the change in our use of the RAC theater and our request for rent reduction.
Okay.
So we're here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Same subject. I was told just a few days ago that RAC was planning to have music in the middle of the village of Sperryville, which there are a lot of residents there. The property that they have asked about is very small, roughly 80 by 110. The back of it is a bog. It has an open well with a broken lid, and it adjoins my property. So many people think that my property is part of that property, and there's no barrier except a drainage ditch that was put in about 100 years ago. Now, my property is posted, and it's recorded with the sheriff's office. So if anyone, and I have cameras down there, if anyone comes on my property, puts their foot on my property, I will call the sheriff or I'll get out my gun. So I'm asking you all to not allow this to happen. My neighbor goes to bed at 6 and gets up to go to work at 3. It's not the right place. They have the park. If they want music, they need to use their park or some other place in Sperryville, which are many, but not in the middle of where people live, and they move there for peace, not for music. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, do we have anybody on Zoom that would like to speak? If so, please do the Zoom raise hand, and we'll recognize you.
Mr. Glenny's also interested.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, I'm seeing none on Zoom. I'm going to let Mr. Glenny come up at this point.
Wow, is that the right height? Good afternoon, Paige Glenny, Jackson District. I continue to be a little dismayed at the lack of progress on the ALS issue with fire and rescue and the inconsistencies on the BLS response or lack of it. Specifically, I think the association probably close to a year ago made a point about we needed ALS support, and we not seem to be able to get there. There's no progress on basing it, hiring people or whatever. Just because we haven't hired an emergency services coordinator doesn't seem like a reason why some of the other actions can't be taken care of. On the BLS side, we have been paying for BLS support for over a year. We have never gotten anything from the association that it was a problem. All right, I'm not saying that there isn't a problem, but we haven't got that. We haven't determined whether or not those are county employees or not. I understand both sides of that argument, all right? But it is an issue. And right now, their workman's comp insurance is hanging in the balance as far as we know. My point is, we need to have, and there's nothing on the agenda to my knowledge to discuss any of these issues that are sitting out there. When are we going to actually move on these things? This is a life and death situation. Why is it taking so long? I just don't understand. It doesn't seem to make any sense. Please move out. This is a primary service you all provide to the community. We need to support our rescue. If the association needs to make a statement about BLS, then they should be tasked with one. All right? If we need to have a discussion about workman's compensation, that needs to happen. It needs to be scheduled. But please move. I mean, I hate to see the thing if someone actually gets hurt or dies because we didn't have the proper support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you. Not seeing any hands, I'm going to close public comment. And that will move us into the consent agenda.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, should the board try and address a couple of the issues that were brought up here?
We have a kind of a period later that we can address those types of issues if you'd like.
But what if the people aren't here? I just thought, with the thing about the RAC Theater and the music, is that a permit that we, our county has to issue?
Rec Theater's on the agenda.
Yes, sir, it is.
But this is a different topic.
It's under new business.
I'm asking a question about what was raised, not what's on the agenda.
Music conspiracy.
Music.
Does RAC need a permit from the county to do what they're advertising to do or whatever?
I've not heard of the event. I can't speak to what permits they may not need without knowing what they plan to do.
If you'd like, Mr. Black, so that he can answer.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Hi. RAC was approached by the Sperryville Community Alliance, and that they had this idea of trying to bring some music to the town as people began to emerge from the pandemic and people kind of yearning to get together. And the idea was to provide something, local music for people who live here during early evening hours for families. Be like picnic, kind of soft music, maybe sort of bluegrass. And so we were asked if the Alliance could handle the logistics, gaining permits, talking to neighbors, arranging for parking, to handle all of that. Would RAC be willing to find some musicians and then we would offer some stipends. So we would be taking advantage of our local musicians. So that's where we are right now. It's at the planning stages. This is not something that's going to happen. We're just beginning to talk to local musicians right now. There's a potential venue. It's a nice grassy area. But I leave it to them, the Alliance, to check with neighbors to make sure that's okay. The initial reaction, an exception, of course, was very positive, but I haven't been involved in talking to people. That was going to be handled by the Alliance.
And I would just go on the record as saying, I've talked to Mr. Black about this possible event, and I notified him of my concerns, which is that there are people that live in that immediate area, and that it would be very close to residences. That I knew that there were residents through that stretch that worked shift work or had early commutes, and I was concerned for how it would impact their schedules or businesses. And as an individual that comes from an event planning background, my primary concerns are also public bathrooms and parking, because not having adequate parking and public bathrooms presents, lots of public safety and other public issues. So, those are major concerns. You don't want attendees parking in folks' driveways or giving problems with people coming home from work.
My understanding is that several of the local businesses would make their parking available. And this would be after business hours, so like a 6 to 8 or something like that is what they were thinking.
But there are businesses that do book appointments still during that hours, hours, and places that serve meals during those hours.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, this is all speculation at this point. And
it's in the planning. We're in the planning process.
Yep.
There seemed to be some enthusiasm. It's not universal, apparently. And so, we want to kill a good idea. We'll do that too. And maybe there's another venue.
Well, there's several nice venues, as I mentioned to you. There's the school down the road. There's the fire department. There's also the River District. Those are all very nice venues with ample parking and ample facilities.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I think the idea is to try to kind of support village life and bring some people in. We're not thinking of hundreds of people, but I don't again, we haven't had it, so I don't know who might attend.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, that's the
Thank
thing
you.
with events these days. Once you put it out there, I mean, you don't know
Sure,
how many people
sure.
you're going to get because there's not very much going on.
Right. And the hope, of course, it'd be something that would appeal to families, and they would want to bring their kids and have a picnic. And so maybe there's a better, better venue if we hear that there's really is some support. It would seem to be a nice win-win. Support some of our local musicians, allow some families to get together outside, kind of safe space. And we're thinking of maybe, a picking party, not a picnic party, a picking party, and some bluegrass, something like that.
Has a date been picked for this?
No. We had somebody said, how about maybe May 13th? And I said, no, that's not going to happen. So it might, if something could come together fast enough, late May. If it doesn't, we'll do it we'll try in June. So it's an idea, and it's beginning to congeal, but they're clearly, we're just kind of putting the pieces together. So this is not clearly a done deal, because we haven't even gotten a permit yet.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Now we're going to go into the consent agenda.
Madam Chair, if we could please pull the supplemental appropriation item out of the consent agenda, at least I'm okay with everything else.
Anyone else? Not hearing any. If we could approve the consent agenda after pulling supplemental appropriations.
So moved.
I think that we also need to look at the minutes.
You want to pull them out?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we're pulling the minutes and the supplemental appropriations.
Is there anything left?
We have accounts payable and contingency budget process.
Really just accounts payable.
Yep. Why don't we just go through the consent agenda then? If anybody has questions. All right, we'll start with minutes for adoption. Ms. Smith?
I just wanted to note, I didn't think the minutes from the February meeting, the beginning of February meeting, adequately reflected the events at the beginning of that meeting. I felt like some mention that Supervisor Smith or Ms. Smith asked how many people were waiting outside the door, and the sheriff's deputies responded that 6 people were waiting outside and could not be let into the meeting. That should be reflected in the minutes.
I don't have any problem reflecting that, as we allowed them in after the vote was taken, I believe.
I just thought that should be added to adequately capture the circumstances.
While we're there, though, I've always had a question. How did it happen that we had the sheriff, the chief deputy, and 2 other deputies here? I just wondered how that happened.
Madam Chair, I think we're having a discussion about the minutes.
I think so.
Well, that is a discussion about the minutes. I just wondered how it happened that we had all those law enforcement officers here. I think that should be reflected in the minutes. There's certainly no one contacted me about it, and so I had no input on that.
Madam Chair, I think it was pretty clear that.
Mr. Whitson, you can turn this way and talk to me if you'd like. I know that Ms. Donahue is the chair, but it's my question.
Okay, but I think the rules are that I address the chair. Is that correct, Madam Chair?
In Robert's rules, that is correct.
Mr. Frazier, what do you want the minutes to reflect?
I'd like to know how we had the sheriff, the chief deputy, and 2 other deputies here when no one had contacted me as if there was any problem. So that was what the whole problem was when we started that meeting, is that we had to have a vote whether we were going to disenfranchise people that were outside. And of course, since the board had never had a vote like that previous, we had a vote, which was an addendum item, and it failed, so we allowed people to come up here. So I just wonder how it all started. That was never addressed at any meeting.
The minutes, as they're currently written, and I did review them and provided some edits to Mr. Curry in advance of the meeting, state up front all of the machinations that occurred at the beginning of the meeting regarding people not being in the room for social distancing and public health reasons, and then basically our ultimate willingness to allow people to come in when it was determined the numbers were not large.
It wasn't our ultimate willingness, it was because the vote failed since it was addendum.
It says that. It says that clearly in the minutes.
There were 3 members that voted to disenfranchise the public, but since it was an addendum item, it didn't carry. What I would like to know, and it was never explained to me, how that all transpired.
I don't believe any of our minutes have ever stated that the chair.
Well, we've
felt-
never done this before. We have never
We
tried
have
to
had-
alienate the
We
public.
have had the sheriff here, we have had a deputy in the room, and
Yes,
that
but
was.
We have, but we have never tried to disenfranchise the public. I just wondered
Mr.
how that
Fraser,
happened.
I think you are taking this out of context, sir. And it's a meeting, and we are on the minutes specifically, and I think these are covered with,
Well, I think
maybe
it needs to be
Chair Smith's-
reflected in the minutes, since we're working on them, how that all transpired.
I reviewed the minutes and I provided edits to Mr. Curry in advance of the meeting. If you want to review the minutes and offer some edits, and I think Ms. Smith has some, then we can table those.
Well, I have offered some earlier to Mr. Curry, when we had some typos, but why do these minutes only reflect what you want them to reflect, Mr. Whitson? Why can't they reflect what I would like to see in there?
What I'm suggesting is we table the minutes and that you provide whatever edits you wish, and then we can adopt them at the next meeting.
I can't suggest an edit if I don't know what transpired that happened to start with. How did it happen that we had all those deputies here? We've never had that happen before.
Mr. Fraser, when we have deputies here, does anybody ask you your opinion whether we should have a deputy here or not? Has that ever been asked
No,
of you
we
before?
normally have like one deputy here because that's kind of a normal thing that we might have one here, but 4, and then we exclude people, that has never happened, and no one contacted me that it was gonna happen.
That is correct. No one contacted you. No one contacted any of the board members. I asked I asked Sheriff Compton to have support here because I knew it was going to be a contentious situation. And it has been, just like the Second Amendment was, and then you had a whole building full of deputies and the sheriff.
We
I
were
don't know
over there
why
with it,
this
but
is
there was-
different.
There was only 30 people here, there wasn't 500.
I'm sorry, this is not part of the minutes.
I'm asking a question how that happened because I cannot
I think
offer
I
any
just
proper
answered
edits.
that question.
So the chair took it upon herself to ask for
For the
all.
safety of the citizens and the board, like any other chair has done in the past, if you have concern, you let the sheriff know, and she's very willing to have a deputy here.
I don't have a problem with the chair having that authority to ask for law enforcement, but the chair exceeded her authority, which I think I said at that time, to try and disenfranchise the citizens.
Everybody came in the room, Mr. Fraser.
After a vote that y'all
It's all
lost.
in the minutes.
It's in the
I
minutes.
don't know what we're trying to change.
I don't
It's
either.
all there. Just read the minutes. It's clear that you had an issue with the way it was arranged. We had an issue with too many people in the room. Once it became clear there weren't a lot of people here and that we hadn't reached critical mass from a public safety perspective.
No, that's
we
not what
reached- we
happened.
reached a
What
critical
happened was
compromise
you
and
lost a
let everyone
vote.
in. I don't know what-
Mr. Whitson, you're interrupting me. You lost a vote. You lost a
Mr.
vote.
Fraser,
in the minutes.
if you want something added to the minutes, would you bring it back to the next meeting and so we can
On
move
this,
on?
on this particular one, I think I can come up with something, yeah.
Thank you very much.
I just needed some background information, which was not forthcoming.
All right.
All right, moving on.
Moving along, we are into.
So are you going to adopt the other sets of minutes, or are you going to put them all off?
That's right, we do
Could I
have
just
others.
find out, when people send corrections to Mr. Curry, what is the timeline then? So we all get the minutes, then somebody makes corrections, but how do we all know the corrections that are made?
When
We approve is right here.
when board members provide me with their corrections, they get incorporated into the version that is attached to board docs.
So, but we had an instance before this meeting where we were discussing something that another board member that sent you a name that was a correction that was spelled incorrectly, and then we had to go back and correct the correction. So I guess my concern is that if we're all not reviewing the same information at the same time in the same round of corrections, that something may be done incorrectly.
I'm happy to implement whichever process the board would like me to implement.
I mean, I've wondered about this for a while because it seems like a lot of corrections are being made sort of one-off and not broadcast.
Madam Chair, maybe Ms. Smith makes a good point. Maybe we should administratively set a deadline prior to meetings, after which no edits can be provided to the draft minutes. And that way, everyone on our board and the public have a static document to review well in advance of the meeting. And I think that would resolve it. And whatever that date might be, doesn't matter, as long as we have enough time to do it. So maybe a week in advance.
No, I don't think that's good. I think what we used to do is always good. What we could come to the meeting with our edits, and then we could agree on the edits, and then that would be the adopted form.
To me, that doesn't seem administratively efficient to be talking about typographic edits at a Board of Supervisors meeting, but I haven't been around that long.
I didn't find it too cumbersome to ever do them in the course of the meeting.
I don't know how often it's going to happen. It may not be cumbersome at all. But we survived it for years doing it like that.
Well, we can give it a try next month, as far as I'm concerned, and see how that works.
Okay.
Sounds good.
I'll put forward a motion to adopt the remaining set of minutes other than February 1. That would be budget work session, the meeting minutes of March 1st, and then the 3 additional budget work sessions thereafter. So a total of 5 sets, all of which I've reviewed.
We have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Parrish? All right, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Have we adopted Robert's rules as our formal,
No,
no, thank you.
we have chapter 30.
All right, and then we're going into accounts payable. While we're here, I know I had a few questions. Anybody else on accounts payable?
I want to thank Mr. Curry. He answered my questions before the meeting, so thank you for your time, sir.
He did mine too. I just wanted to bring up the CenturyLink bill for $13,987. I think most people looking at that would go, holy cow, that's your phone. But it is not. Mr. Curry, you had said that it was a part of the.
That's a maintenance service contract for the 911 equipment. So it needed to be updated and renewed prior to the upgrade of the 911 equipment, which purchase award is on this agenda.
And then the Power Phone Incorporated, $35,678. It's part of the emergency dispatch.
Emergency medical dispatch, that's a supplemental appropriation the board added to the budget earlier meeting. That's grant funded.
And for those that don't know, that's going to help with the dispatchers be able to help people on the phone before help comes to your house. So I think that's a very positive for the county. And then I had asked about the Simmons, Rockacharlie, and Prince, $4,417.
And that's 2 things. That's the final payment for their Flatwood electrical design for the compactors that they've just been delayed in sending their invoice, as well as invoice for design work for the school generator that was needed for the grant application.
Thank you for that. Anyone else on accounts payable? All right, can I have a motion?
Make a motion that we pay the bills.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Supplemental appropriations.
I just wanted a brief explanation for Mr. Curry because I think it's a very sensible adjustment to the way we've been, an adjustment to the way we have been billed by the regional jail force for our shared services up there. And it appears that in the past, and Mr. Curry, correct me if I'm wrong, we have, at the end of the fiscal year, any true up that occurred would be applied as a credit against our bill for our 4th quarter payment, which I think from an accounting perspective is not, it's not as clean as it could be. So would you mind just briefly filling us in on what changed.
Yes, you noted that correctly. As board members, I think, are aware, the process with the regional jail, we pay for the number of bed spaces that we use on a proportional basis with our partners, Warren County and Shenandoah County. And so at the beginning of the fiscal year, when it's time to budget, we don't know what that will be. So we make an estimate based on the prior 3 years. And then at the end of the fiscal year, we do a true-up process on the actual past 3-year usage, as well as the actual revenues and expenditures from that fiscal year. That results in recently a credit for the localities. Recently, the credit's been pretty large because of the amount of bed rentals that are happening there to Page and Culpeper. So recently, in the last several years, that credit has resulted in a lower fourth quarter payment, and this particular budget line was budgeted assuming that credit was going to come through. The Regional Jail Authority Board decided to change things from an accounting standpoint, have all 3 of the members pay the full fourth quarter, and then return a credit check to the county. So the county received a $50,000 credit check, but I'm asking for a supplemental appropriation of $12,494 of that to make up the difference on what we budgeted at the beginning of the year for the jail. The rest of the money is not appropriated at this time and just falls to the fund balance.
Thank you very much. And if I'm not mistaken, and not to put you on the spot, I think it was your idea in your role on the regional authority, regional jail board, is that correct? To clean it up this way. So now we're basically going to be applying a credit to that line in our general ledger, and then it's a direct offset of that credit, but then we'll be paying a full bill for the fourth quarter. Is that right?
We've already paid the full bill.
Okay, great.
Actually, we're overspent by $12,494 right now.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll move that we go ahead and adopt the proposed supplemental appropriations as presented.
Do I have a second? I'll go ahead and second. Having a motion and a second, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. All right. Now we're going into appointments. First one is the Rappahannock EMS Council.
Rappahannock County has 2 seats on the Rappahannock Emergency Medical Services Council. They're held by Donald Gore and Jack Atkins. Mr. Atkins' term will be expiring June 1st, best we understand. Mr. Gore's will expire June 1st, 2023. Received a letter from the EMS Council that's attached to this agenda item from the council letting us know that that term ends, and they provided a strong reference for Mr. Atkins. As was noted earlier in this meeting, you will have a new emergency services coordinator / management coordinator coming on board. It occurred to me that the board may want your employees sitting on that council, because this employee will have be heavily involved in the EMS side of things and representing the county and the board's interests in EMS matters. That said, the board can appoint whoever you'd like.
I personally think it makes sense to have the coordinator on that board to have the connection. So is that?
My intention would be to do that, any appointment at the next month. I just wanted to get out ahead of it and make sure the board was aware of what was coming, and that appointment be made in June.
All right. And the coordinator will have initiated his employment at that point?
We intend to have a start date of June 1st.
Has the Fire Rescue Association been asked about their preference?
They have not. That's, of course, a board appointment. If the board would like to defer or receive input from the association, I'm sure they would be happy to provide input.
Mr. Atkins has served in this seat for quite a few years. It says he's been active since 2003. I don't know why we would all of a sudden want our emergency services coordinator on there. We didn't have that for the last 18 years.
But my thought was, because we're now dipping our toe into the paid EMS world, And this employee, new hire, will be responsible for that paid EMS contingent that you would want there and your voice directly heard on this council.
All right, so you want us to bring back our input for the vote next month?
And if there's any outreach you want me to do on your behalf, just let me know, and I can do that, reach out to the association or others.
I'm kind of in a quandary. I don't exactly know what this body does. Well, I don't know that it's important that we have this position, filled now by the current member, or we wait.
Well, let's wait until next month and figure it out.
All right, if we're in agreement, we can go to the appointment to the Rappahannock County Recreational Facilities Authority.
Yes, this is also an advance notice. There are several terms. 5 of the 9 members have seats, terms ending on June 30th. Have attached to the agenda those listing of those members who have terms expiring, one of which is Ms. Eldridge, who was just appointed to the remaining portion of an unexpired term. This is one of the bodies for which your policy requires an advertisement to go in the paper automatically. I will do that over the next month or so. Because these terms end June 30th, it was my intent to bring them to the board for appointment at the July meeting. If you would like me to handle it differently, let me know. But that will drive when I place the advertisement in the paper.
This is a really vital authority. As you all know, I'm the appointee this year from this board. I know Mr. Del Grosso, who served as chairman for several years, does not wish to be reappointed. I think we should advertise for these. I'm not sure who wants to be reappointed. Have you heard if anyone else is not seeking reappointment, Mr. Curry?
I have not, although I have not asked them. When the advertisement goes into the newspaper, I will also send a notice to those current members whose terms are expiring and let them know the application for reappointment.
I did speak with my constituent, Ms. McCool, earlier today, and she'll be submitting an application for reappointment. I know she's an enthusiastic member of the board, so.
We have several issues, or I should say challenges on the authority. One is that we've struggled since Steph Ritter left the authority. There's been no one willing to serve as secretary on a regular basis, which creates continuity issues. And then, of course, with Mr. Del Grosso stepping away, he served as our chairman, and there will quite possibly be a leadership void there. So I think advertising sooner rather than later would be preferable.
We had an individual that had sought to be appointed when Ms. Alders was appointed to the remainder of Steph Ritter's position.
Mr. Forback.
Right. I don't know why. I mean, if we're just going to have one position, maybe we don't have to advertise.
Your policy suggests that advertisement is compulsory on me unless the board waives that policy, which you certainly can.
I think I'd like to talk to Mr. Forback just to make sure, because he's become very active in Company 4. Need to make sure he's.
That's true.
Yeah.
I kind of forgotten that. That's true. Maybe we should contact him first, but.
Well, anyway, I think it makes sense. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, maybe, I don't know if we want to handle this with a motion today, but I would say that if we talk to Mr. Forback, and he's become thankfully very busy serving as a volunteer with Company 4, which we would be incredibly grateful for. And perhaps we know Mr. Del Grosso is leaving, and we possibly may have other folks leaving. If it looks like we're going to have a position that's not filled, I suggest we advertise for it.
Yeah, I would say that we really should go through with the advertisement. This board, in my observation, has been really a strong, effective authority board, and let's hope we can keep it that way. But yeah, I think it's paramount that we advertise, because you never know what talents are going to step up to the plate.
Well, and we really need a secretary.
Right.
I could highlight that in the advertisement if you'd like.
I think that's very critical.
All right, do you need a vote to move forward on that, or you're fine?
I need a vote to not advertise, but if you are aligned to advertise, then
Advertise, yep,
I've got my marching orders.
okay. All right, the next appointment is for the County Community Policy and Management Team.
Yes, this appointment is really a statutory item. The Code of Virginia requires the Department of Social Services representative, director, or their designee to be seated on the CPMT. The board previously appointed Ms. White in her interim capacity as the director of CPMT. Ms. Crooks is now with us. She's expressed interest to be her own designee on the CPMT and hopefully take over chair duty so I can slip back to vice chair on that body. Because of its statutory nature, I did not request that she complete an application form, but the board still must make appointments.
I make a motion that we appoint our new social services director to this position on the RCMT.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Parrish, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.
As Mr. Goldsmith pointed out earlier in the meeting, there is a vacancy on the People Inc. board, and as was noted, Ms. Parker formally filled that position for the Board of Supervisors. Ms. Crooks has said she's willing to join and be your representative. She suggests that she do that for a 6-month period so she can determine the value to her value to the organization's value to social services, how they work together, and then report that back to us, you and the board, if she thinks it's not effective and somebody else may serve that position better here in the community.
Similarly, I'd suggest that we appoint our new DSS director, Gail Crooks, to serve as our representative on the People Inc. board.
I could second that, but I'd like to add that since this is a board appointment, the board would like to be at least be brought up to date. We've had problems recently with some of our appointees. I don't know if you've read about it or heard about it, but we've had appointees that don't keep this board apprised of what they're doing or what they're working on. And since it is a statutory board appointee, you know, it's kind of like, I kind of think we ought to be at least brought up to date every now and then.
I think we could certainly come up with a reporting mechanism and frequency that would, meet the needs for information.
I think the public would like that. At least that's been brought to my attention. That,
I think the board should probably set a clearer expectation. Mr. Fraser, do you want it quarterly, monthly? What would you expect?
I mean, if it's just something that's, what's the word I'm looking for? If it's,
Perfunctory?
yeah, just perfunctory, non-consequential, I don't think, it shouldn't be monthly, but quarterly. I mean, certainly if you were going to be embarking on something with People's Inc., like trying to, bring in a 52 apartment, low cost, what do you call it, subsidized housing project, I think as our representative, we should kind of know about that, something like that. So that's kind of what I was getting at.
All right. We have a motion by Ms. Smith, seconded by Mr. Fraser. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you again.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you for your willingness to serve.
All right, that brings us to old business, tax credit for active members.
Thank you. You recall at your last meeting, I informed you that the treasurer and I reviewed the Rappahannock County Code Section 2211, which outlines the process used to provide credits to the volunteer fire and rescue companies based on a point system devised by the Rappahannock County Volunteer Fire and Rescue Association and approved by the Board of Supervisors. And Nick and I thought that there were ways we could improve the process that would make it easier on the county and on the volunteers. After providing that preliminary information to you, Mr. Goff and I reviewed the code and wanted to back check a few items back into state code. And that delayed me from being able to put this public hearing, advertise this public hearing for today, and was not able to do that. So I'm bringing it back to the board, and in addition, having discussed it last time, the Fire and Rescue Association has provided a letter that is attached to this agenda item stating a number of things, one of which is that they weren't interested in a program that would cause 1099s to be issued to members. They didn't want that to happen.
If I could interject there, I checked with both New Kent County Administration and Prince William County, and they have a very similar program, and they issue 100% of one vehicle, and they don't issue 1099s. And I think I gave you this historical perspective of that Mr. Luke had talked with the CPA, and he said that they thought that they may have to do that, but we don't have any evidence that the county would have to do that.
Ms. Nick and I actually ran that to ground. It's very clear IRS guidance that the 1099 must be issued if there's a credit type situation. I'm not intimately familiar with the New Kent system, but the Code of Virginia also allows the board to change the assessment category for a vehicle for volunteer fire and rescue, and then change the tax rate for one of their vehicles. And so the board could change the tax rate to 0. And then in that case, it's not a credit, but it's no tax. And so a 1099 would not need to be issued in that situation.
Well, then that's what we need to do. Maybe that's what they're doing.
However, it's a little more complicated in the Commissioner of Revenue's office to apply a different tax rate to only one car owned by volunteer fire and rescue members, not all their cars, but one of their cars. I'm not saying it's impossible, it's just more complex.
I don't think it can be quite as complicated as getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning and running a call. It can't be that complicated.
I guess I wouldn't compare the two.
I think we can do this. Prince William County's been doing it for over 25 years that I know of. New Kent County says that they do something very similar, and I don't know why we can't do it.
It's legal, and if the board would like to do that, then we can draft an ordinance to make it happen, and we can bring the Commissioner of Revenue in to explain to you what work it's going to take to make it happen.
I don't think that we should be essentially penalizing a volunteer for running more calls to where they qualify for some sort of a tax credit. I think we can find a way to make this work, because none of this stuff is copyrighted, so I don't know why we can't do it. So I would move, if this is the proper time, or do we do it under new business?
I think this is a proper time because you discussed it.
We've got the same topic on old and new business on the
It's a
agenda.
slightly different topic on new business. That has to do with the point system devised by the association and approved by the board.
Well, I would make a motion then that we instruct the county attorney and county administrator to look at these other counties and see what we may need to do to come up with a new ordinance that would come up with a way to give the volunteers one vehicle tax exempt. Whether that's a new structure or whatever it is we need.
There's no harm in looking into it, and then we can make a decision later, and that would give another chance for the association to give us more feedback too. So I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion on the floor and a second. I guess the motion is to
Instruct staff to,
look further into.
Look further into
well,
it.
we can create such an ordinance that's not complex.
Yeah, we've already done all of that, so
Yeah.
we'll just put it together and present it to you.
Yeah.
If you want to go to tax rate 0, if that's what I'm hearing, on one vehicle, yeah.
And I guess we'll get a report from the Commissioner of Revenue on whether there are any software issues or anything like that that we need to figure out.
Thank you. Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Going into new business.
I guess this was just noted, this same section of code states that well, it may be rendered void by the time we're all done with this, if we're not going to use 2211 anymore, but at least for this last year, the code section states that a point system is to be devised by the association and approved by the board. Such a point system was devised many years ago, and the member agencies need to develop 80 points on this scale, and if they make 80 points, then the chief certifies to the county administrator, and so goes the process. During the pandemic, it's been difficult for some members to obtain 80 points because helping out with fundraisers and other sorts of things have just not been possible, and some members weren't able to run calls. And so the Fire and Rescue Association, in the same letter, on my prompt, came forward with an alternate, they devised a different set of rules to point system, so to say, for this pandemic year. And they would like, I guess, the board to approve that different set of rules. And what they've stated is, let's just use the 2019 points that people accumulated before the pandemic. And for those people that are new and wouldn't have had points in 2019, we'll just let the chiefs decide whether they're active or not. And I guess that's a point system, and it's devised by the association, and would have to be approved by the board if you want to implement it for this next round for the personal property tax bills that will be coming out in December. And it's the definition of who is an active member.
If you're looking for a motion as a launch point for discussion, I would move that we follow guidance from the association in determining the tax credits for active members for volunteers for the rescue squads.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I didn't mean to. Was there any other discussion?
I guess my only question was whether, I see Mr. Candenquist, I don't know if you or someone else could explain this definition of active and how it's going to be assessed, and maybe it's not something you can answer. I don't know.
But let me just ask you this question as far as the definition. That's your question.
Yeah, just how the chiefs are making a judgment about active.
Okay, all right. Well, and just to clarify, and this was based on the letter that the association provided, and I'll just read you this last paragraph, it's not that long. Regarding the point system for tax relief qualification, the consensus of the association is that the chiefs, and I would also add, and the presidents, this is not just the chiefs, this is the president. The chiefs and the presidents of the companies will review the 2019 year point accruals for each active member, responder, or administrative, either one or the other, because some of the members don't run calls, but they do provide background with fundraisers and so on, and use those points to determine the qualification of the members for the 2020 point year, which in turn will determine which volunteers will qualify for personal property tax relief in 2021. The presidents and the chiefs will also review the level of activity participation of those newer members who join the companies after the 2019 point year. They will see how active those new members have been with the limited number of non-emergency and emergency response activities since those new members joined, and base their qualifications for tax relief in 2021 on that. And I just point out, and of course I can specifically refer to Amosville, as we've had a number of new members, and I'm sure that Harold can attest to what Company 7 is doing, that have joined since the 2019 point year. We have 2 of our members who are enrolled in the EMT class. They've taken EVOC, they've done a lot of things. We also have a couple of members because of their personal work activities. where they have been out of the county more than they've been in the county, and so they haven't responded to the extent that, or they haven't been available for these activities as some of the other ones have. So that's basically how that falls into the qualifications for the point system. We're not going to change the point system, we're going to leave it alone, and the categories to a certain extent will stay the same. But as far as the qualifications, we're going to use the 2019 points that were accrued. And for the most part, I think most of the members who have been responding to calls are the same people that have continued to respond.
Okay.
Harold, did you want to add anything?
The only thing I'd add is that I think the intention is to give the presidents and the chiefs some ability to say, well, that person really stepped up, but they should get it. And this other person could have done other things and chose not to. So even though they made the list for 2019, the possibility is they could be struck off. 2021 because they're not active.
Letting the chiefs and the presidents make that call, especially in such a weird year, I think makes good sense.
Well, I just want to Madam Chairman, the presidents and the chiefs currently, and have been since 2007, when the personal property tax relief went into effect. It's always been the presidents and the chiefs who review the rolls and the activities and such, and then they're the ones that make that recommendation to the county.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
All right, sorry for the discussion being after the vote, but we did approve that. This takes us to number 2 under new business, which is the RAC rent reduction request. Thank you for sticking around.
Yes, as you can see, attached to this agenda item, there's a letter that was received from RAC, Mr. Black, requesting consideration of reduced rent for the facility, recognizing that they no longer plan to have assemblies in the space. I'm not sure how to best characterize it, although they would still like to use it for storage. They've asked for the rent to be reduced from $325 per month to $100 a month. And to the best of my knowledge, there's no written lease agreement for this. It's a month-to-month arrangement, and they'd be asking for that month-to-month arrangement to change. Some time ago, I looked into the electrical use, and the maintenance shed is on the same meter, so it's not easy to figure out exactly who's using what. But the total bill is much less than $325 per month. Most months of the year, and during the winter, it can get up to that amount. Probably because the maintenance shed uses electric resistive heating. So it's probably mostly coming from the maintenance shop. But I didn't think it was, this is not something that I felt like I could just unilaterally change. There was, looking back in the old minutes, there was agreement to allow John McCarthy to enter an agreement with RAC. I guess it was a handshake agreement.
I guess my only question, and perhaps Matthew, you could answer it for Ms. Morgan. Do you have any other options right now for storage purposes? I assume not, and that's why you're asking to continue using the basement of that building.
That's right. We would like
If people on Zoom probably are not going to hear you unless you're near the microphone.
Sorry.
Jump in, Sally, if I missed something. Yeah, with regard to storage, since we have a lot of sets and costumes and so forth in that, particularly in the basement area, it'd be great just to leave it there. I don't think that space is being used for anything else if we were to vacate immediately. And in addition to storage, even though you were, looking for a word or phrase to how we were describing the change in our use. And that is, we're not going to hold any more public performances there because of safety issues. That was the primary driver there. But because we have so much storage, we'd like to continue that. And we anticipate there might be occasional demand to use it for maybe a small rehearsal, or maybe somebody wants to have a meeting there. But it would be for a really small group, so that, you know, if, say, there were a fire, 15 people could get out pretty easily, as opposed to 150. So that was the occasional, as opposed to only being used for storage. So that gives us a little more flexibility, but that's, right now we don't really anticipate that being a very common use of that old building.
Yeah, Madam Chair, and other board members should jump in. I would say a couple of things. One, we recognize from the building study, which is, I think, what caused you to rethink the use of that building for gatherings of any size. That building study, I think, leaves us all concerned about liability issues related to that building. So the first thing I would say is, I think since you've already made the decision that you're not going to hold public events, I would hate to see any kind of in-between use of that upper portion of the building. I think we need to be crisp and decisive about that, because liability is liability. And I recognize 15 people might be a marginally safer scenario, but if we do go ahead and agree to this, at least from where I sit, I really think for all of our sake, it would be good to curtail, eliminate any use of the upper portion of the building. The second thing is, we are doing a review of all the county buildings that we currently own as part of that building study, use of space and economic use of space and renovation, et cetera. So my question would, not really a question, I would just encourage you to look for alternative storage facilities, because we might soon get to a point where we can't accommodate that as a storage space any longer. Mm-hmm. And since there isn't a lease, we're effectively on a month-to-month arrangement with you all.
Right. Sure. And especially if the other members of the board agreed that you don't want that space to be used for anything other than storage, that certainly would lower the utility of that space for us, because we could envision maybe a small rehearsal being carried out there with again, like, with a small number of people that maybe we thought would be safe. But clearly that's a judgment call, and not everybody would agree on where that point is.
I thought we'd had a discussion as a board that the liability for that space doesn't fall back on the county. The liability for the use of that space falls back on the user.
We do have insurance.
Yeah, that was my recollection.
I would like to point out that for just $100 a month, that, and I said that in an email, that perhaps, our maintenance department could actually use that, because Mr. Jenkins has no place to set up his saws. And if we had that space available, he wouldn't have to take his saws and bring them down at the end of every day.
Are you speaking of the basement or upstairs?
Yeah. The basement.
So, perhaps your storage in the basement could be moved upstairs and still allow you to do
Right.
the limited.
I could check with our community theater group to see about that.
Well, I think it's reasonable that the county does receive some rent for the structure. If there's no liability issue, I don't have a problem with an occasional small rehearsal. But I do think it's important that it's strictly a month-to-month basis, so that either party could pull out at any time. And I personally think that $200 a month would be reasonable rent for that. So it would, more than cover obviously the electric bill for the shed and the building, but also, it would people pay something for the usage in general. So I'd make a motion that we allow this to go through with the monthly rent on a month-to-month basis for $200 a month.
But what are we talking about? The county take back the basement, or And they use the upstairs for storage?
It's month to month, so we can stop it next month if we want to. So I'm not really suggesting that, but we can work together on that.
Well, I think now's the time to kind of talk this through. Do we need the basement?
We don't know until we talk to Mr. Jenkins.
Yeah, I would want to have Mr. Jenkins.
Right, which we can do anytime and cancel it next month if we need to. I mean, there's no harm in, I mean, there's no sense putting it off. So anyway, that's my motion to charge $200 a month.
Yeah, and meanwhile, we're shifting activity over to the old movie house across the street. That's currently owned by Nancy Raines. So we'll hold our performances there, and we'll be paying rent there. So we're trying to also keep our costs down too, as a.
All right, I have a motion
way.
on the floor. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? A motion and a second. All those in favor of the $200 rent month to month, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. All right, number 3. Yes, sir.
The motion was $200 a month, but we could continue to use.
Upstairs and downstairs.
Doing what?
Upstairs and downstairs.
Upstairs and downstairs, that for an occasional rehearsal. I don't have any plans for that right now, but.
Yeah.
Is that part of yours?
Yeah, because my only concern was the liability issue, which doesn't seem to be a problem.
And I apologize, I wasn't clear on that point, so, yeah.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you. Purchasing award, NG 911 call handling equipment.
Yes, ma'am. As you're well aware, your purchasing ordinance requires the board to make awards when the cost is over $10,000. This is appreciably more than $10,000. This is the call handling equipment for the 911 system so that we are ready for next generation 911. There really aren't that many software and equipment vendors out there, and Vesta is the equipment that most people use that is currently owned by Motorola. It's bounced around to various other vendors over time, but Motorola bought them about a year and a half ago, I believe. So the sheriff is asking, and I believe it's appropriate to make this award of this Vesta call handling equipment as well as the other separate pieces that are required and funded by the NG 911 grant from the state. It's $150,000 for the call handling equipment, $23,416.49 for text to 911, which is required as part of NG 911, $16,571.41 for what they call the I3 compliance, which is another part of the NG 911. And then there's an add-on of $27,709.59 for command post addition to this system that is not required by the grant but is requested by the sheriff. This would allow them to go mobile and take 911 calls from any place connected to the internet if necessary. And I believe this is certainly a good use of funds. It all fits within your budget, and everything but this last item is fully paid by grant. I did reference the quote numbers and originally attached those quotes to board docs, took them down after about 10 minutes when I was looking back over them and reading the letters confidential on the bottom. After we adopt them, then they would no longer be confidential after we enter into the contract. But this is through a cooperative procurement agreement that I entered into. It's actually Houston, Galveston, HGAC, and they have access to a number of different contracts to satisfy the state procurement requirements. So everything is ready to go, and the sheriff is ready to implement.
Just to make the motion, again, for launch point for plenty of discussion, if there is any, I would make a motion that we adopt the purchasing award for the NG 911 call handling equipment as included in the packet.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, not hearing any. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. All right, does anybody need a break before we go into this? I don't want to. Okay, looking good. Going into board committee reports. Building committee.
Yes, Madam Chair, the building committee met on the 29th. We had to reschedule from earlier in the month. We have unfortunate situation where two members had surgery. And I think we're also going to have to be making an appointment or two to that body. But we're working on the board will have to also approve that, but we're working on a charter for the building committee. The building committee has reviewed it, and the rules committee has reviewed it. I'll get to that in a minute, though. What we did do as a building committee, I can't remember Randy's last name all of a sudden.
Vaughn.
Randy Vaughn, thank you, sir. From Wiley Wilson, and we discussed both the project for looking at a new admin and county administration, a judicial building, and went through that page by page and space by space need. And we also talked about the proposal that we had brought before you from the Milner Corporation about doing the assessment of the brick and the deterioration of the mortar joints. So I think they're going to be getting back to us with a different, slightly different proposal on that as well. But we are going through the new judicial center space needs and looking at some changes there before we bring that back to the board. So now back to the charter. The charter, we're going to be making a recommendation there, and I guess we won't have that actually finalized, or do we? Am I overstepping that?
It's not finalized yet. There was still input, and it needed to go back to the rules committee after input.
Okay, so we will probably have that for you at the June meeting, a new charter and maybe an appointment or two to that body, to the building committee. That's kind of a brief rundown. I didn't really give you much meat there. All we did was just discuss the conceptual design of the new judicial center and the potential of putting the admin there. And we'll get all the wrinkles out of that before we bring back something for the board to actually, do more discussion on.
Thank you. Recreational Facilities Authority?
We did meet at our normal appointed time in April. There was also a couple of special events in the last month. There was an Earth Day cleanup and plantings on the 24th, Saturday the 24th. That was very well attended. It was a beautiful day. I went and took pictures because I don't have a green thumb. And then there was also a work day. Some volunteers came and put in a local group came and put in a trail down by the river. That's turned out quite nicely, and if you haven't visited yet, I'd encourage you to stop by. There's been a lot of work there this spring, in between that trail installation and the work day on the 24th. It looks really great. Also, all the trees that have been planted around the entrance make it look very inviting over there right now. So the 24th, there was a work day, and then there was a dark sky event on Saturday night this past weekend. So those are gearing up for the season also. We did have a design proposal from Racy Engineering for a perimeter trail for the park. So there were some concept issues that were ironed out, I think, at the meeting, and we have a revised design for that.
Thank you for that. The lights on the, good grief. Pavilion, thank you. Were on today. I don't know, are they on a timer or?
I don't know. I noticed they were on Saturday evening, but when I went by at about 8:30, but I just thought that was because maybe they were closing down from the dark sky event, or
Okay.
9. I'm not sure.
Okay. All right, on to Public Safety Committee.
We did not meet this month, and I'm kind of thinking to wait until we have the new hire in place before we call one of those.
Rules Committee?
We also did not meet in April for some of the same reasons regarding surgery and folks unable to attend.
Planning Commission update.
Sure. We had our regular meeting, and 2 words to sum it up: tourist homes. And there's really, we're seeing more and more the Planning Commission agenda, and by association, the Board of Zoning Appeals, dominated by tourist home applications, special use permit applications. And Ms. Smith and I have talked previously about how we can streamline that application process, but still allow for public input if needed. Because it really is bogging us down at the Planning Commission. One of my constituents, Ms. Barsky, made some very, I thought, important remarks during the public comment period, and she was talking about the proliferation of tourist home type rentals in the aggregate in the county. And I am thinking about how I can mine the wisdom of people in the state and find someone to come and really give us an outside perspective on how Rappahannock County, local government, and our zoning team can best manage this tourist home trend. And it's something I've always been concerned about. I think it chips away at our community in a certain way. On the other hand, people would argue that these tourist homes, if they're not bothering anyone, should be encouraged. But I do want the Planning Commission members and me to hear from someone who can give us a judgment about where to go with those. But just the application process, I think, has to be fixed. And that's not to say public input's not valued. Right now, the Board of Zoning Appeals has a public hearing for all of those. But it's clear if we have public hearing for every one of these at the Planning Commission, we're going to have difficulty getting much else done. And I think there were 7 discrete applications on our agenda. So that's something I really want to focus on. And then one other thing I'd like to do is try to bring in someone to talk about agritourism. And this is another area where I think we're going to all be challenged from a zoning perspective and zoning compliance and enforcement perspective. I met with the VDOT land use engineer at the entrance to Clark Lane, which leads up to the property adjacent to Little Washington Winery. And that property now has an 18-hole frisbee golf or disc golf course on it. And so when we voted to deny a special exception permit for a country inn on that property and hook that denial to the basic fact that Clark Lane can't accommodate more intense use than is currently on that lane, what's happened, and I've talked about it before and I'll say it again, what's happened is exactly what we didn't want to happen. So now there's more intense use than that which was contemplated under the country inn application. And so I'm really stymied, and I'm trying to figure out how we can clean up our zoning ordinance, clean up our enforcement mechanism, and make sure that people operating intense uses of properties that are effectively in the middle of private residences are not hiding behind an agritourism label to do whatever the heck they want while saying to the county, well, yeah, we heard you. You denied us one thing, but we're going to do something else, and we're going to use state law to pave the way for that. So I'd like the Planning Commission to hear from citizens about agritourism in the county, and I'd like to hear from some experts. And Ms. Donahue, you and I participated in the county supervisor conference recently, and there's some great presenters. One from the Berkeley group, I think, who might be the perfect candidate for speaking with us about these issues. Sorry to go on so long, but that's really the challenge we're facing right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll just say, I've stepped away from the notion that we should have a paper application for those, because frankly, I think there's so many nuances. I do think the Planning Commission, certain members, in particular Mr. Light, is doing an excellent job of vetting those applications and pointing out inconsistencies that I'm afraid might escape staff that's just issuing a simple paper permit. So I've stepped away from it. I think it's good to have a discussion, and I mean, we have a real problem with rentals in this county now, long-term rentals. And I mean, it's been in the newspapers. I'm sure we all know people that have been affected by this recently. I've talked to folks that have usually multiple rentals available, looking for a home for somebody, and there's nothing available. And I mean, do we want to pause issuing these, or I mean, is there any kind of sentiment like that on the Planning Commission?
Yeah, I think those are all valid questions. I mean, that's exactly where I'm going. And when the minimum acreage was locked in at 10 and 20 for zone ag and conservation, I thought that would have the indirect effect of keeping those smaller parcels out there for long-term rentals.
Right.
But we all know there aren't that many of those properties. So yeah, it's an excellent question. And I think what I would like to look at is what authority would we have as a county government to press the pause button, as you point out, because with the pandemic and people realizing how much demand there is for travelers who aren't going overseas or across the country, who'd rather spend a weekend near where they live, we're clearly seeing a push for more and more of these. And I do think from a community and county planning perspective, we do need to think very thoughtfully over the long term how this proliferation of these tourist homes is going to affect how we look and how we operate. And frankly, I've also been focused on the fact that the direct lodging tax revenue generated by these is nearly immaterial in the grand scheme of things. And so while there is indirect economic benefit, and we can't argue with that, you also can't quantify that. So the one measurable fiscal indicator of the contribution to the bottom line of all of these tourist rentals is what is lodging tax revenue collected on them. And last time I checked, we're talking in the low tens of thousands of dollars. So clearly the direct economic benefit is not great, and the potential adverse effect on rental housing stock is significant. So yeah, these are the questions I want to wrestle with.
Well, I always think that joint meetings for educational purposes are a great idea. So if there are folks that we want to request do a class, I think on both of those topics, some joint meetings with the Planning Commission
Sure.
would be a wonderful idea.
Yeah, I'm starting to work on both of those topics and trying to get someone who can speak to us with some experience. And if we can do it on a joint basis, I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fire levy board.
Wait a minute, I got something to say.
Oh, you do?
I just was going to say that a couple of years ago, I heard lots of complaints with B&B owners that their business was slacking off and they were, having trouble staying afloat. And so I'm surprised to, see all these applications for B&Bs, and I wonder if the market will, make things seek its own level in the long run. But meanwhile, I was looking at the zoning report here, and everything was passed on to either the BOS or the BZA without recommendation.
I had the same question.
And I was just wondering if this is a pattern that's going to continue. What purpose, what is the purpose of even these applications going to the Planning Commission? I know that's a very general question.
Right, but I think it's a great question, and that's, so you have, basically at the last meeting, you had 7 applications, and if you schedule a public hearing, that means you have seven public hearings for 7 applications, which means that you have a preliminary review for one planning commission meeting that will take a couple of hours, and then the next planning commission meeting, you have 7 public hearings about those applications, and then if they are moved forward to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and the Board of Zoning Appeals has a public hearing. So this is precisely where, as the chair of the Planning Commission, I'm trying to determine the balance between administrative efficiency and making sure the Planning Commission is in a position to focus on priority items such as zoning ordinance amendments that are, some of which are already queued up, and handling this proliferation of applications. And that's that's what I'm trying to determine. Now, in Fauquier County, for example, I believe that these types of applications just go straight to the Board of Zoning Appeals after some administrative application. And whether or not that's appropriate, I don't know, but just managing the volume of these is time consuming and frankly, with the public hearing process at the Board of Zoning Appeals, that's why they're moved forward. So that's all I can say. It's a challenge. And if we're going to double up on public hearings, so be it. But it's going to put the Planning Commission as a body in a bit of a jam because it'll be very difficult to focus on anything else.
So what about, in the absence of a public hearing, that would be at least some information passed over to the subsequent boards that would help, that would give some indication of which way the Planning Commission was leaning and a potential snags in the application. So
yeah, I think what you see there is a group of special use permit applications that went forward without a recommendation because the members of Planning Commission were not willing to make a recommendation absent a public hearing. So it's a cart and a horse type thing. And I think that's one thing we could do is just hold a public hearing for every application, and that's a fine approach. I'm just trying, basically, in that case, given the Board of Zoning Appeals is going to have a public hearing itself, the idea was to try to move those forward, most of which were all on large parcels, relatively non-controversial. Some questions about septic systems, that type of thing easily could be reviewed at the Board of Zoning Appeals, and the Planning Commission hopefully then is freed up to go back to zoning ordinance amendments and revisions. So,
well, I got a question. 5 of these applications from your last meeting were from one owner. Would they have to be 5 separate public hearings, or could the one owner, address all 5 at one time?
I don't know. Mr. Curry could answer that.
Each is its own permit application, so they would all be handled differently. The Code of Virginia sets out a process through which the BZA or the Board of Supervisors, if the special exceptions held for your own determination, holds a public hearing and the Planning Commission can provide input. Now, your local ordinance takes that many steps additional and puts in this preliminary review followed by the potential for a public hearing at the Planning Commission before it has to go to the necessary public hearing at the BZA or Board of Supervisors. So it's much more public input than is required by the Code of Virginia. And having it the way it is right now, it says the Planning Commission may hold a public hearing, but you don't have to, and that's because the Code of Virginia says you don't have to.
Right.
So there may be certain situations and certain special exceptions or special use permits that are very much in the center of public attention that the Planning Commission feels like a first public hearing is appropriate, and then the final public hearing would happen at the BZ or BOS, but there may be others that they just want to provide input to the ultimate public hearing at the BOS or
Right, and Mr. Parrish, I would add that group of applications related to properties that actually have been operating as tourist homes already without permits. So it was related administrative cleanup effort, and they're remitting back taxes. So our Commissioner of Revenue and her staff actually notified the operator of those tourist homes that they needed individual permits for each of them. So under those circumstances, with that group of tourist homes, you're talking about, frankly, tourist homes that were already operating without complaint, without trouble, without controversy, which is one of the reasons why it made sense to move them forward. I will also add that, for example, we have a public hearing at our next meeting in May on a sawmill application up in Harris Hall. So it's not that everything is going forward without public hearing. It's just that batch in particular, it was, for lack of a better term, administrative cleanup because they had been operating. So it's not that they were untested. But I take your point, and we can start holding public hearings on every single permit that comes in. That's one option. But at some point, you have to exercise judgment, recognizing it's a two-step process anyway. And as long as the public has a way to provide input and people are vetting the details of each application, it seems like it's a reasonable compromise, especially in the case of applications that are on their face, not controversial or problematic.
We do have that meeting on the 24th, or the educational session with Dr. Chandler. So I don't know if this is a good time for maybe that being a question as well, that you can broach with him. But yeah, I think the outside person looking in will help.
So for the tourist homes that had been operating for some time, was there a discussion about whether the revenue, whether they had been taxed?
Yeah, I did mention that. So they are paying back lodging taxes for the operating period, right?
I'd be curious to know what that was.
I had a question about the very same meeting, though, along the same lines, but one of those that you moved on to the BOS without a recommendation was a change to a special exception permit.
Right, and there's frankly, the nature of the request to change the special exception permit does not, in my opinion, and we can discuss it here if you'd like, in my opinion, does not even rise to demanding any kind of recommendation. It's either, it's a yes or a no. It's whether or not you're gonna allow commercial use of that property, so.
Well, that was a decision made by a board at that time, but I also see, is this tourist home that was moved onto the BZA without a recommendation for the same property? Not on the same property?
Correct, but it's contingent upon whether or not the Board of Supervisors agrees to amend the special exception permit
Well,
application.
they shouldn't even apply for that tourist home until the board makes that decision.
Well, they did.
Anybody not pick that up?
We discussed it, and they're working in parallel, and
You
if
can't
we.
work in parallel, you can't apply for the tourist home.
Mr. Curry, would you like to?
So they applied for the tourist home, and then they were alerted to the fact that the condition was placed on the special exception.
Then they can't apply for the tourist home.
Well, I don't think you can necessarily tell an applicant what they can apply for or not.
Wait a minute,
Their money.
if the special exception says no other commercial use on that property, then they don't have a right to make the application.
I think they would suffer from the fault of their application if by the time it was decided that condition were active. And if this Board of Supervisors keeps that condition in place, then the BZA will have no choice but to deny it.
Correct.
The condition is active, so they couldn't apply for it.
I disagree, but Mr. Goff and I talked about the process with their attorney, and we felt this was a reasonable process given the constraints of our ordinance.
If someone doesn't have a right to make application, they have to get that barrier changed first.
So what happened, Mr. Freer, just backing up a month prior to that, the applicant came in with a special use permit application to operate that dwelling as a tourist home. And our staff did a very good job. Mr. Curry did a very good job, Mr. Goff too, and they basically looked at the record and determined that there's a special exception permit overlay that had within it this provision that did not allow the prior owner to operate that or use that building for commercial purposes. So at that time, we told Mr. Brown and the applicant that they needed to address the special exception permit restriction first. And as Mr. Curry just said, he and Mr. Goff discussed the sequencing, and so what we decided is to move the special exception permit onto the Board of Supervisors and the special use permit onto the BZA, and they paid fees on both. And if we deny that, I'm just trying to explain it. If you don't want me to explain, I'll stop.
I understand what you're trying to explain, but this is no different than, let's say we had a zoning situation. A property is zoned a certain way, and it's not allowed. If that use is not allowed, then they have to try and get it rezoned before they can apply for that use.
No, I disagree. The person could apply for a zoning application and staff would turn around and tell them, it's denied, you may not use that. That doesn't stop them from applying. And this is the exactly same scenario.
Well, why didn't staff tell them they couldn't do this?
Mr. Fraser?
This is exactly the same scenario as occurred with the Miller tourist homes that were applied for, went to the BZA. We're actually, at the BZA, there was a discussion that they couldn't do it because it'd be more than one dwelling on a parcel. And at that point, staff said, well, one way you could fix that is subdivide. I don't think anybody wanted them to subdivide, and actually at the BZA, they came up with the idea that they could seek a special exception to allow more than one dwelling per parcel. And in the BZA's action, they made their approval of that tourist home contingent on, in fact, them getting a special exception. And that's the process that went forward. It came to this board, the board issued that special exception. It's the exact same process happening for this parcel as happened for that parcel.
The discussion that we're having now is that we're having too many of these applications and they're not getting properly vetted, maybe, at the planning commission level because of the multiple public hearings that are required. And here we have a situation where that particular tourist home is not allowed because of a previous action by the Board of Supervisors where no other commercial use is allowed on that property. So how did they make application for something that they were specifically forbidden to do?
There's nothing in the ordinance that forbids somebody from applying for a permit. And if we as a community and you as a board are going to tell people they are not allowed to apply for something, I think you're going to get yourself in trouble. People can apply, spend their $600, and be told no. And that may happen in this case if the Board of Supervisors does not change that condition on the special exception.
You're trying to put the cart before the horse. They should have came in for the amendment to the special exception. And that's the way we've always operated. I don't know why y'all are starting to read stuff different.
Which is what it's what we did. They came in with a special use permit application. We told them to clean up the special exception permit try to.
But you've got them both running concurrently. Not consecutively, you got them running concurrently.
With a contingency, so, I don't know.
You can't put a contingency on something that's not allowed.
All right, let's take a 5-minute break, please.
Why do we have to take a 5-minute break when we're trying to get through something here?
This
should not have been allowed. We used to not do stuff like this, and all of a sudden, we're doing things different. So we have 2 board members walk off, so we can't make decisions about stuff.
And tell you that we met in a special meeting with the goal was to look at and approve the association's budget for the 21-22 budget. And that we did approve, and I think we all were given that information at the last budget meeting. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I was not hearing
The association number for their budget?
Yes, that was incorporated in your adopted budget.
And that was all we had discussed at the fire levy board. Treasurer's report.
Everything looks good.
Everything
Happy to
looks
answer any
good.
questions.
Very good.
I wonder if you could pull up the meals and lodging tax. Yeah, this one. I was talking to Mr. Curry about this earlier. I mean, it's really just going back to our revenue projections for the 2021 fiscal year. It's just really startling to see how fortunate we are. If you look at the first set of bars in the graph on the left, I mean, that's precisely what we feared was going to happen. Where you have the first quarter revenue really almost basically half of the year prior for that quarter. And then to see what's happened since then is really remarkable. I just thought that showed how fortunate we all are, and also fortunate we projected the way we did because we came out ahead, so.
Yep. Any other discussion under reports?
I guess the only other thing I noticed in that detailed revenue report, it's not super user friendly. We're a little bit soft. I mean, it's nearly immaterial. We are soft on the, if you go to general property revenue, which I think encapsulates real and personal, everything else, bottom line there, it's strong. I just did note, especially in the context of our discussions last year about concern of late payers who might really be struggling during the pandemic, we are off a little bit in collections against what was budgeted. And I think it's mostly on the personal property side.
Right.
And it was, I mean, we're talking less than $100,000 off of what we're budgeting on that revenue, that aggregate revenue point. So, but really appreciate all the reporting. It's very, very, very helpful for planning purposes.
All right. There's no other discussion, updates on the county administrator activities. He definitely included those in the agenda item. I don't know if anybody has any discussion on that.
Can we just talk about the incoming emergency services manager, please?
The incoming emergency services, I'm sorry,
Manager, the new hire.
under county administrator activities?
Well, it's his hire. Can we have a little bit of information about that?
Of course, as board members are aware, and I've advised you, interviews were conducted with a number of candidates upon receiving several applications. I assembled a team to help interview. Those interviews occurred. There was general consensus around a candidate. I made an offer to that candidate. They accepted the offer, asked for a June 1 start. That is a contingent right now on background check, which is complete, and post-offer pre-employment physical, which is pending. And I expect all that to be cleared up by June 1 and move forward.
There were 7 of us on the interview committee, I think.
So can we talk about who it is and their background and, what to expect at this point, or is that?
I think it would be most appropriate to do that after the contingent status is removed from that hire.
Very good. Thank you.
And hopefully he can be in attendance in the June board meeting.
That is my intention.
Building permit report.
I don't know if anybody bothered to open it up, but there is a
Very
significant
robust.
increase, amount in values reported on building permits, $3.3 million.
Wow. Zoning administrator report. I think, anybody have any comments on that? It looks pretty straightforward. All right, VDOT. Do we know, Ms. Smith, anything happening in Sperryville?
There were some of those lines that they run across the road to take metrics. I haven't heard any updates on numbers.
For the counting on 211 speed
Yes.
study?
Yes.
I did have I've started a new monthly conference call meeting with all the VDOT folks, Mr. Nesbitt, and then land use folks to go over everything happening in the county, just to make sure we're on the same page. We did have a discussion about the striping on Main Street and whether the thermoplastic is in fact the product that is best. They definitely want to do the wider stripes, and they're a little worried about the thermoplastic chipping up from plow activity. So they're looking a little bit further into that to make sure that they have the best product to satisfy the desire for the wider stripe.
Then had they been able to fix whatever problems are going on in their sign shop for that additional signage? Or did they not mention that?
The crosswalk sign?
Crosswalk sign, and then there was some similar signage to what they have in Woodville.
So the crosswalk sign, they're working on that. The Watch for Children sign, if that's what we're referring to in Woodville.
No, the Woodville, they have that speed monitor by.
I don't believe we touched on that. There is a special program in the state that I meant to look up and I didn't, that allows an extra fine in certain areas, and you post it that there's an extra fine, and we actually collect the extra fine here locally. And we could do that in different stretches. I think there are some speed limit restrictions on where they can go, but we did not discuss the signs in detail.
Okay.
All right, moving on. LFCC College Board Representative Annual Report. All right, and then moving into matters presented by the board. Start with Mr. Frazier.
Matters presented by the board. I think we all received an email from Ms. Barsky, and I think we need to kind of put that on the agenda for talking about next month. Exactly how we have so many zoning infractions that keep coming up. We rely on neighbors to turn their neighbors in. I think maybe we need to take a look at that. I'd hate to see some sort of zoning enforcement, Gestapo style type of zoning, but I think, you know, what we have really is a broken system. So maybe we need to take a look at that. There has to be some way to make sure that when somebody gets a special exception or special use permit like Mr. Whitson was talking about, you know, they don't just start doing something different and call it something else and we have the same infractions or maybe worse. So I think it's a good thing that we you know, bring somebody in to talk to us about these issues and how we can get around it. I know of one particular way, but it may not be the best thing to do, so probably reserve my comments until the experts show up. I don't know. I guess I don't like the way things are. After 20 or 30 years of doing things a certain way, we start all of a sudden doing things different.
Thank you. Ms. Smith?
I would just say that I think that's a good idea. We've kind of been down this road before with agritourism, and so much of it is, you know, it's written into our comp plan, it's important to us, but then there are these sort of uses that, are they traditional uses of agritourism properties, and does it really fit that category? I think it's a good discussion to have, and certainly in that instance in Hampton District is a prime example. I wonder if we've got the comp plan done, or in this admittedly upside down time. It's a challenging time to do it, but it's been 10 years since we had an economic revitalization committee put together to sort of take a look at where we're at with local business, where we're going, what suits Rappahannock County in terms of business development, if any, or encouraging traditional businesses in the county. We had an instance not long after I joined the board where there was a business roundtable over in Warren County. I think Mr. Curry and Mr. Lazinski and Teresa Wood attended. And the county has nothing when opportunities do arise that we can present to show our point of view and the sort of businesses that we do think are appropriate as a county. So I know it's a tough time to maybe talk about doing this, but it's also an opportunity. And I wondered if the other board members felt the same way.
Sure, we could. I mean, we could brainstorm maybe next month, talk about what we pull together in what form. The last one, I knew some of the people on it, and they met a few times and then issued a report.
Right.
So maybe there's, to the extent we're bringing in people with subject matter expertise, maybe that's another area, community plan, economic planning, where we could try to not reinvent the wheel, come up with something maybe more effective than what was done last time.
Right. I mean, I think it's important to target, you know, even areas where we would want to see it occur, and I don't think that happened last time. I mean, I would be interested to continue that conversation and maybe take it on as the Rules Committee and revisit that document and see how that was put together the last time and the parameters we want to pursue to put it together this time.
Last time, was that a meeting that folks attended in Warren County or something, I thought I heard?
There was a meeting at the inland port that was put on by the state, and they invited people from each county.
Yeah.
We just appointed people that applied for it and nobody had any real business background.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Mr. Whitson?
Very quickly with the high winds, at least on Harris Hollow Road and then other roads in the Hampton voting district, there were a lot of blowdowns of dead ash trees. And so this is really just something I can follow up on, or perhaps Mr. Curry and I can follow up on with VDOT, but I would like to know what the plan is for ash tree removal to the extent those trees are in VDOT right of ways. It really concerns me that someone's gonna get hurt or killed. And the size of the trees that came down on our road, there was an area that has been concerning for a while, and it's borderline in the right of way, but I would like to know from a VDOT representative when appropriate, what the plan is for ash tree removal. And I recognize it's a tremendous cost, and I believe that their local maintenance budget came in $500,000 short of what they're expecting, so maybe that's part of the issue. But I do think for public safety, which is one of our primary responsibilities, we need to work with VDOT to come up with a real plan for ash tree removal.
Mr. Parrish?
I think talking about the trees, that came up before, and their policy is to let the tree fall down first and then clean it up because of the expense to go, around and remove them all. And there's a chance they'll fall the other way too, not on the road. But I had in response to Mr. Glenny's comments, I had a conversation with a supervisor from Madison County, Mr. Yao. I think his name is Cardi Yao. And as you all know, they have one station for EMS and fire, and it is a blended with it's combined with volunteer and paid, and it sounds pretty efficient. And I would say about 10 years ago or so, Mr. McCarthy and myself, and I'm not sure if another supervisor went or not, and they with their people, and they walked us through what they were doing, and he showed a willingness to do that again. And so I think it'd be a good idea if two of us went down there with Mr. Curry and had a meeting and see exactly what they were doing, and maybe that would help us move forward with what Mr. Glenny was talking about. And maybe if Ms. Donahue and Ms. Smith would go down there and Mr. Curry, and then they'll size it up and bring back, some hints on what we could do to move in that direction a little faster than what we've been doing. That's pretty much all I have.
Thank you. I had a couple of things, Mr. Curry, on the pager update for the fire and rescue for the northern part of the county. I know we've had problems. I'm just wondering if there are any updates.
I had a virtual meeting with representatives from L3 Harris to try to get to a point where we could better understand what the issues are in that area, whether we're receiving what we paid for or not, and if we're receiving what we paid for, how do we fix it and make it better for the folks who need to use pagers in that area of the county. We also talked about some complaints in the Jackson district area as well. We came up with a few interim steps to try to sort out issues before we move to more costly methods, and we're getting ready to implement those. That includes more detail than you want, probably triggering the VHF paging system so it's broadcasting all the time, so you could hear the background carrier squelch, and that would help us monitor the signal strength throughout that area. But then when a call comes in, it would broadcast over the top of it. There are some downsides to that because then folks with the pagers couldn't just monitor, they would hear that all the time. They'd have to have it on alert mode. So I sent an email off to association and asked them for their input. I have not received any input back from them on doing that. So I assume that means that they're okay with it. But I'm sure I'll hear about it when we flip the switch.
Thank you. I did speak to the president, Kevin Williams, the other day with regards to pagers and the association letter that he had written. And part of what he said was there used to be a better communication process, I guess, for the association and the chiefs with regards to specific to items that were coming up on a board meeting agenda. And he was hoping that we could get better with that. I didn't know, personally, I don't know if we notify people that are on our associations or groups that are going to be on the agenda, or if that's our job as the board member for that particular area.
If you're referring to the topic on the tax credit, maybe, I don't know. Of course, I sent a message to the chiefs and the association about that. I sent a message to the association about the point system, of which they mentioned to me a number of times, and I pointed out that the ordinance requires them to devise a point system. So I certainly have advised them, but I'm happy to make any notification process you want. Would recommend that their folks add themselves to the FOIA notice list, and they will get advised at every meeting. And
that's a good point.
They can check the agendas, see what's on there, and on top of that, be happy to alert them extra.
Okay. Thank you. I can tell you that the assessor came to my house a couple of weeks ago, and according to him, everything was going well. Seemed to be a nice gentleman, wasn't in a hurry, stood there to talk, and he didn't know I was a board member until later in the conversation, so it had nothing to do with that. But are you hearing anything on that progress?
Nothing bad. I know it's moving along. If you'd like an update of sorts, Ms. Graham could bring the contractor in and provide an update. I don't know. It'd be more of one of statistics than more of any substance.
Do they have an end date? Do they know what the?
Well, there's a very defined end date, but it needs to be done for the land book next year. But we have an agreement with them that has deadlines and dates in it, but I'm not aware of them.
Okay.
As talkative as he is, it's going to be a while.
Well, sometimes that's how they get a little information.
And then the last thing I had was, I know the E911 addressing may at some point require some addresses to change, and I didn't know how we're communicating. I'd much rather tell the citizens up front that this could be a potential. I found out the other day I need to be on a lane, so I just didn't know if there's some way that we can communicate that better.
This is something that came up in the Public Safety Committee over a year ago, I believe, and there's a recognition here in the county that some addresses will have to change to meet national standards. If you look across the news media, you're seeing that a lot of different places, and you just search about NG911 and address change, you'll find a lot. If everybody in our history did a perfect job of addressing, then we'd probably be okay, but that just doesn't happen anywhere. So there will be some corrections. The sheriff and Lieutenant Jenkins are working this project, and it's certainly up to them on how they are going to address the public. Right now, they've been visiting people's homes and talking to them personally about the changes. My recommendation to both of them that more defined policy or ordinance be adopted by the county on the addressing process, street naming process. And that would have the full force of the board and law. And then when they're talking to constituents, they can refer to the fact that it's law. And it's ultimately for public safety.
Thank you. That was all I had. We are at the point of recess until 7. Do I have a motion?
Could we talk, go back for a minute to talk about the ALS? I have to say, I'm glad you brought it back up, Mr. Parrish, because, we did vote as a board in January to do this, and I think it's, the chiefs asked us in September. The association voted on it in December. We called together a quick public safety committee meeting in December, right after the association meeting, to get it on the agenda in January, and here we are in May. So, I mean, what's the expectation of the timeline to get our responder in place at Company 1?
Are you
question to
okay
me.
with going down to Madison and visiting?
I don't think we already know what we're supposed to do. We already have voted on it. I know that it's challenging when we have a shortfall in personnel, but I don't think exploratory visits are what we need to do. We just need to do what we voted to do in January.
Yeah, so I'll just say very frankly, it's on me to make that happen. I don't have the capacity to make that happen right now. I'm waiting for the new hire to come who is going to be charged with making that happen. If we want it done faster, then we'll have to find a different solution than just thinking that I'm going to snap my fingers and make ALS providers here in a brand-new program of which I have no personal experience.
So what I would anticipate would happen, the way things are going, is that we're going to end up, as you know, this is a sensitive subject, you know.
Oh, I know, it's very
As
sensitive.
you're dealing with personalities of these chiefs, et cetera, and the volunteers that put their heart and soul into their company. But if I were going to forecast the future, I would say that Castleton and Flint Hill would close, and I would say that we would have an ambulance running, a paid ambulance running out of Washington, out of Station 1. And, but, you know, you just can't say that out loud without getting some kind of, you know, adverse feedback.
You just did.
And I just did. So here you go.
But you waited till the end of the meeting. That's the good news. There's not
Yeah,
any.
nobody's here. But anyway, yeah, you're right. So whatever we got to do is going to be painful, and it's going to take some courage to, you know, move forward. And nobody wants to be the bad guy.
Well, I mean, we've already been the bad guy. And I think that's important to recognize is that we have made every effort to make this a volunteer-led way
Yeah.
forward, which I think is integral to the process. We are surrounded by cautionary tales where it didn't go so well. And so we have made this a volunteer-led initiative from the get-go, starting with the chiefs, moving through the association, getting the endorsement of Public Safety Committee, and then this board voting to do what the volunteer-led effort recommended. I understand there's a problem with people and that position has been empty since last September when this came around. But at the same time, I think we have to have an expiration date on it and some expectations so that that it happens.
So the reason I brought up Madison is because they got a county with probably double our population. They have one station, you know, and we have 6 stations, and we have multiple, you know, responders show up to a single incident that doesn't seem to be particularly efficient way to approach it. And so, yeah, we have the, you know, volunteers, but there's still a lot of, you know, overlap. And somebody, you know, that's the reason I asked Mr. Williams way back when he was standing there, what about if this new coordinator would be like a czar, a dictator, and that he would, like, you know, take over and make those tough decisions, and everybody have to acquiesce. And Mr. Williams said it was not a good idea. He said he didn't recommend that, and he should know. Yeah, I don't know what the solution is. It's obviously not easy.
Well, and I think liaison between the companies is probably a better word than czar. I mean, he has to help with communication.
Yeah, well, coordinator's
between the
not a bad word
companies.
either.
That's true. But, you know, we all know the companies are independent and volunteer-led. So, and let's not forget that for what we pay as a county to our volunteers, we get an excellent service and we get an excellent value.
All right.
To build a ground-up paid staff is a very expensive endeavor. So I do think we get an excellent value and service from our volunteers, and we need to do what they've asked us to do and get this ALS solution in place.
And it's about $500,000, if you take, we talked about this at our last budget meeting, it's about $500,000 scattered around our fiscal year budget, that all is directed toward that. So I agree with you. We need to get it up and rolling. And Mr. Curry, is it fair to say that this is the number one priority for the new hire moving into this position? I mean,
Yeah, if there's 100% of work that the person needs to do, it's probably 95%.
okay. And so presumably when that person comes on board, we can offer some expected timeline and additional support to make this happen.
Right. Because it is possible, as proven by Madison, that we can have a blend of volunteers and paid, and they're just going to, figure out how to work together on that. And so, it's okay, that's point well taken.
Thank you for bringing it back up.
We really don't have any facilities to park somebody. There's like no place for them to stay over there.
Yeah, on Company One?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Company One had said that they would take care of that if we took care of, our part of the deal.
Yeah, it's going to cost, but I think that the public wants it. The public wants, when the call goes in, they want an ambulance to go out.
Absolutely. And I think Company One is still kind of researching how or if they're going to do it. I haven't
And
heard
it is
anything
in
moving
September.
forward on that either, as far as their board is concerned. Have you?
I haven't.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
We'll, do you need a motion? to
I do.
The chair is empowered to recess the meeting.
Recess?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I am going to recess the meeting until 7 PM, where we will reconvene here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.